No, I think I've had everybody before, now that I recognize you. Okay, good. So this is a very different class than what you had with me, and I'm sure you had me at 610 or 607 or both, right? Okay, very different than what you experienced there. Just like Brad 634 was very different in the way that we did things than those other classes, right? Brad was at 634 last semester, right? Okay, so this is supposed to have a different bent, and I'll get into how exactly that has a different bent in just a little bit. We're going to be talking about power and influence, that's the name of the course, and we'll also be looking deeply at the concept of trust because it's related to both. So today we are going to introduce ourselves to each other. I don't think that'll take very long because we know each other. Do you all know each other? Like I recognize you? No? Okay, so we'll introduce ourselves and what we do. We'll review the syllabus, get to know you a bit, discussion of, I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. I met him at a CBFA conference 2 years ago, and we started talking about potentially working on a paper together, a presentation together. He's a great guy up at Gannon University, but I still can't pronounce his name, even though he's told me, so I'm just going to say Dr. K, okay? Review the FEFA reading, introduce the power assessment and networking action plan, because we're not going to be here in 2 weeks, because it's Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So, just like he's confused, I don't want you to be confused, okay? Or I had 2 of them, right? Were they both football players? Anybody know?
No, he was baseball.
He was baseball? Okay. So you are Kevin?
I'm TJ.
TJ who?
TJ Simmons.
Okay, and you're for business 610.
I am for, no. I'm for,
Oh,
sitting in.
619. Oh, yes,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
my brother.
I was just, come on in, have a seat. I was just talking about students who were in the wrong class, so I was making sure that you were in the right place. Sure, okay, yeah, I know exactly. Yeah. So, he's just a visitor sitting in. Okay, so at any rate, so we'll review the FEFA reading, the power assessment, and networking action plan. So 2 weeks from now, we would normally be back in class. It's Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, everything's closed, so we will not be in class. 2 weeks from that, we'll be back in class. In the meantime, you'll be doing this and that, so I'm going to talk about what you're going to be doing with that. Okay, so if you don't know, I kind of designed the MA program, and when we put the program together, there were some things that we're trying to look at it very, very academic focused, very like theoretical, like hey. So the first thing, BUSI 610. You all had 610, right? 607, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We've all had 607 together. Okay. So that's trying to get you the right mindset about like what? You tell me. This is a review. You all just admitted that you had my class. So tell me. Leadership is not about you. Lesson number 1, right? It's about others. You're in a leadership class, but it's because of them. Remember your Ranger tab? That's for them. Remember that story, right? Okay. So very academic, and then some things are very practical. 624, which is running online now. Who's in 624 with me now? You 3, right? Okay. And 619 are the most geared to being the most practical of all of these, right? So everything that we're talking about, you should be able to take and work with immediately at work. Okay. So and there's a reason for that. This is by design. We thought this through. Let's talk about the syllabus. I will pull this up here. And who does not have a syllabus? Anybody? Yeah. Pass that back to you. Do you want to?
Next Monday.
So next Monday is 610. You can come back for a joyful experience of remembrance if you'd like.
Okay.
But you don't need to be here for 619. Anybody else?
Is the one, yeah, is that the actual one?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay, anybody else? Okay. So, what's that? Oh, you're looking at the courses?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the reason for that, yeah, the reason, okay, so that was an MA. So the MA grew out of the MA. So we had an MBA program. We added classes to a leadership emphasis with the mindset of, hey, down the line, we'd like to do this with the MA, with building that out. So those courses were very intentional in order to build out an MA. So you'll see, who's at MBA in here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you. Okay, the rest are MA. Okay, that's fine. It's just, I mean, it's just what we're doing in the MA is taking all that people side and doubling down on it, right? As opposed to finance and accounting and econ and right. So I describe it like this: if your greatest, and this is for you, I describe it like this: if your greatest problems are going to be people problems, MA might be the way you want to go. If you're trying to be a captain of industry and you need to learn how to rise through the ranks to become a vice president and president or whatever, if that's where you're going, go with the MBA, right? Because you're going to need the accounting and the finance and all those other things. But just general leadership kind of stuff, we're getting a double dose over here. Make sense? Okay. So here, the first page, you don't need to worry about the course description or rationale. You can read that on your own. There's a pretty big reading list. You see there on page 2 and 3. Okay, so you need to read. You're going to need to read a lot. I like filling up your bookshelf. It's the kind of thing that I live for. Let's look at the bottom of page 5. Okay, it says to read assigned readings, and then it says class participation. So class participation is going to be 150 points for just showing up and talking and interacting with me. Okay, 150 out of 1,000, so 15%. You get 1 free skip because life happens and things happen. After that, it's going to cost you 50 points for the next skip. Okay, so 1 free skip. All right, so use that wisely. Next page is power source self-assessment. Now that is going to be this thing, and this is going to. Can you pass these out and make sure that it goes like the whole thing, one whole thing at a time? So, right. I didn't put a staple in it because I want you to get it back to me, and to get it back to me, you're going to have to like find a scanner or something and scan it in. Okay. And so this is from a book called The Elements of Power, and it's just trying to identify, where your strengths are as far as power and influence, and where your weaknesses are. So for example, somebody who's been in an organization a long time has a certain history within that organization. They know where the right people are. People know them. They have a reputation. They know where the bodies are buried. Those kind of things, right? So they are very strong there, as opposed to somebody who's new to that organization that's going to be weak. Okay, so that is going to be due next week. You'll see it in your syllabus, and we'll talk about that later. But I want to make sure that that was in your hands. The next thing is the networking action plan, which I'm going to give you here. Can I ask you to pass these out as well? Okay, so the networking action plan is due either week 3 or 4, but we're not back until 5, right? Because of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, we're going to be back. I think it's week 3, but it might be week 4. So that's the next thing that you're going to be doing, and I'll talk about this at the end of the class, how you're going to go about working these things out. But right now, I just wanted to make sure that they were in your hands before anything else happened. Discussion boards. So your discussion boards are going to be focused on these actions. So your discussion board, okay, so let's do this first. Alleman, Brown, Bryant, Castellano, Cavan, Howard, and Dyer. Raise your hands. Okay, you are, yes, and Dyer. You are team A. Everybody who doesn't have their hand up are team B. Okay, got that? So if you raised your hand, you're team A. If you did not raise your hand, you're team B. So in the discussion board, what you're going to do is you're going to simply fill out that power self-assessment and maybe say a little bit about like, hey, what do I need to work on here? That's all. You're going to scan that, post it on the discussion board. That's the first part. The second part is you're now going to look at your peers, what they put in this assessment, and you're going to give them the best advice that you can of how they can improve it with whatever wisdom you picked up over time. Okay? Just go ahead.
Could you tell me what group Jennifer's in? She works with me, but she's unable to attend tonight.
Jennifer is Brian, right? Yeah. Okay? That'll be posted on Blackboard as well, so it's not going to be a problem. Okay, so that's part A is you doing it. Part B is you interacting with your peers, trying to help them. Hey, my high is this, my low is that, and helping them along. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm asking you to do. Same thing with a networking action plan. It's going to follow that same pattern. Okay, so that's where it says PDB, PDBR, power sources assessment, and counseling your peers. So you grow in the counseling as much as anything else. So the more you put into helping others see around their corners, the more insight you're gaining. So please take that seriously. And then in week 6, you'll see new concepts. This is where I'm asking you to find some kind of piece of research about power and influence that is an aha for me. That's your bar, right? And I go, whoa, that's interesting. Okay? If you can do that, you've gotten something good. Okay? And then you're going to interact with others and try to see how maybe yours or theirs integrate or relate to each other, or find something else that relates to somebody else in the second part of that. That's week 8, new concepts and new connections. Exams, you'll take 3 exams and 1 final exam. All are open books, you know the drill with me, right? Okay, everybody's, well, except for you, everybody's been here in one of my classes before. So they're all open book, all online, all time, same thing. But you can't do it if you're late. Hi, hey, welcome. Okay, you need one of these and one of these. Okay, there you are. Yep.
Did that
Well,
have 2 pages?
I'm sorry?
Did that networking plan have 2 pages?
Networking plan was 2 pages. Did you not give out 2 pages? Okay, well.
Restart.
There's 2. Yeah, let's try that again. There are 2 pages to this.
Sorry.
I got page 2.
Okay, so yeah, that might be actually the best way of doing it. Say, who has page 2, and then we'll give
I have page 1.
Or you can swap with somebody who has page 1 and then you need the whole one.
Sorry about that.
All right, so exams, 3 tests and a final exam. Class concepts journal, you all print those off yet? Or download them, or whatever you're going to do with it?
Download.
Okay, so these are questions related to the reading that we're going to be able, if you get this done before we come to class, we'll be able to talk about it more fluidly, and it'll just move more rapidly. Okay. Leadership credo and departmental policy. So it's just, leadership credo is just kind of a statement of, here's the way that I would operate, here's how I would, how I plan to lead, things that you jot down that are helpful to you for, you know, so for example, back when I was a graduate program director, I just, you know, it was just a policy that pie goes to the runner, just like in baseball. So if we do something, but it's going to affect the student should not be affected by it. They shouldn't be negatively affected because of what we did, and if there is that kind of conflict, the student gets the benefit of the doubt. So that was just you know, kind of a operating guiding rule that made things work. Okay, those kind of things. We'll talk about that in more detail later. You'll get to in what's the name of Powell's book? You just bought it. It worked for me, and it worked for me. Powell talks about his 14 principles or 14 whatever of Chairman Powell or whatever, and it's that kind of model, and you'll see that later. We'll talk about it more then. The departmental policy is something that is then taking this a little bit further. You're assuming, you're pretending you're going on vacation, and you are leaving a 1 sheet or so of instructions of how your department's supposed to run in your absence. Okay? Very simple, but you have to be focused on what needs to happen in your absence, right? And so you're just trying to translate that, not just from how you operate personally, right, but to how things should operate as you're gone, which is a little trickier than the first one. Screwtape's letter about you. I stole this with his blessing from a seminary professor who we were talking about this, and he told me what he did with this. So you're going to read at the end of this the semester the Screwtape letters. You might have read it before, but you're going to read it again, and then you're going to write it from Screwtape's perspective, as if he's writing to Wormwood about you. If you know what I'm talking about with the Screwtape letters, that made sense. If not, you think I'm speaking gibberish, but you'll see later on what that means. How to trip you up, where to look for your weaknesses, and this is really insightful if you're willing to be insightful about it and think about where you could get tripped up or tempted or fall off, or find power too alluring or whatever else. And then professional influence practicum. Okay, so. This is the fun one. So last semester, I think it was Amy that said, so do we have a big class project in your class in 619? And I said, no, but, and yeah, the but is that it's not really, it doesn't work exactly the same way, but it's in some ways easier, and in some ways it's a little bit harder. So you'll all be individually graded for the things in here. And here I'm going to read just a bit. There's no class project this semester where you have to work together to complete some kind of large class project with major deliverables at the end of the semester. Instead, you'll have to demonstrate that you personally have what it takes to influence in a dynamic environment. We will work on a large project. It's not a class project. You're not responsible for each other's work, right? You're responsible for you. We will work on a large project where the goal is to learn and grow in our understanding of the subject. The subject is trust. Okay, that's what we'll be studying. Okay, you will have to continually prove the value that you bring to the table. This means that you need to be prepared, offer quality information, draw illuminating conclusions, take a leadership role perhaps in the process if you want to do well. Your professor will be the sole judge of your contribution. You will be competing against everyone in the class. This isn't Survivor, okay? So it's not like that, like, I have to make sure I trip them in the hall. Not like that, no. You're just trying to stand head and shoulders above other people in what you can contribute about what you've learned about trust that enlightens the class, okay? Your professor will be the sole judge. Social loafers will be exposed. So in most class projects, social loafers can kind of get away with some of these things, right? Now it's not that easy because we assign roles in the beginning in an organizational chart, and so we kind of know who's who, but there's still some social loafing going on, right? So here it's going to be a lot harder because what I'm going to do is when we get to this point, I will take out my attendance roster and I'll just start putting down either a 3, 2, or 1, depending on what you say as we're talking about it and how many times you say it and that kind of thing, or not the same thing, don't repeat yourself, but how many times you offer really good advice. And so I'll have this strange little list with numbers on it that will then determine your grade for this portion of the project, okay? So you're going to be finding information about trust. Now to get that started, we should have read Dr. K's article. Remember I said I can't pronounce the name? Yes? You have that? I know you don't have that. Who else needs a copy of it? Here you go. Who else needs a copy? Okay? This is what you were supposed to read before you came to class today. Remember? Yes? Anybody else need one? I have 2 more to give away if anybody wants one. No? Okay. All right, so that's where we're going to start. Okay. We'll begin by reading Dr. K's Leadership Beyond the Bottom Line. Is competence and expertise enough? Before session 1, please read Kushnikov so we can, that's how I pronounce it, but I don't know that that's right. So that we can begin to unpack it. We will design a survey and collect 20 responses from each of the members of various business organizations. So each of you will survey 20 others based on a survey based on the literature. Okay? It's not hard. I'll help you with the survey. It's not like you're going to have to all work on different surveys. It's pretty easy. You just have to kind of remember at 607 last semester I think I did this, where you got 5 coworkers to evaluate you. Same stuff. Okay? Pretty easy. And then we'll talk about our findings in class. Now I said in session 2, but a colleague was talking to me about this and said, this would be better if we do this at the end rather than the beginning. And so I'm going to alter that a little bit, and we'll do the collecting of that later on after we actually get through some article stuff about it. Okay? So that we know what we're talking about and we can see things then that we won't see in the beginning if we do it that way. As a class, we'll try to understand and grapple with the concept of trust. Some class time will be devoted to this discussion, and that class time that is devoted to this discussion is where I'll be writing down my 1, 2, 3s, and 0s every time you speak or don't speak. Okay? Got it? Okay, so that's where that is. So to Amy's question, yes, we do not have a class project, but I don't know that this is easier in that sense. I mean, it is in some senses of coordination, but it's not in the sense of you really have to prove yourself. So this is kind of an introvert's nightmare. I'm sorry, introverts, but introverts. Who's the introvert here? You are, I know. Who else? You? You really?
Yeah.
Sure?
Yeah.
That's interesting. You are. Yeah, so you two, I'm not going to do this for you, but you two I will let speak first. Okay? So that way you don't get lost in the shuffle. If you want to, you don't have to. Okay? Each week I will let you start if that's what you want to do so that you can not be, left out. Okay? Fair? Okay. My wife hates it when we get to church and she's like wanting to be late enough so that we don't have to shake hands with other people. She's as introverted as I am extroverted, so it doesn't bother me at all. I'm sure no pastor was thinking like, oh, so I'm keeping people from coming to church on time because, yeah, but there are people that use that strategy.
Say hi.
Huh?
But all you're doing is like saying hi.
Yeah, but if you're, can you explain this somehow?
Introvert?
Yeah.
Just
And you don't want to do that. You want to, he didn't even want me to call on him just now.
Yeah, that's all.
Right? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I can explain it.
Go ahead.
But, well, introvert versus extrovert, it's like what fuels your battery? I'm sure you've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that word.
Yeah, so I don't mind. Hey, I don't know you.
Right.
Right? But my wife is like,
Like,
all of a sudden their shoe gets interesting. Yeah. Okay. As a class, we'll try to understand and grapple with the concept of trust. Some class time will be devoted to the discussion. While your contributions are individual, we'll collectively build a scholarly database that you can speak from as you describe your findings and draw connections in class. And your goal is to be influential in here, right? In the process of helping the class understand as much as they can about the concept of trust. Are there any questions about that at this point?
So it's not,
It's devious, I know.
yeah, I was like, wait a minute, so it's not like an actual project, but however, in other words, you better make sure you read and
Yeah, you better have that part together. Yeah, I had way too much time to think about how to turn screws on students with this. Okay, so after that, what you see on the next page, was that it?
I was looking back at it.
Okay, so what you see on the next page is all the things that are due and how much they're worth, and they add up to 1,000 points, because I don't like math. Okay, so you can easily determine how many points you have or what percentages at any time based on that. Okay, and then you see the grading scale and rubric. Now I've gone to color or shading it. Okay, F, that's bad. That's right. Okay, you see that? So if you can see the shaded colors. Other policies, late work not accepted. If you talk to me ahead of time because grandma's in the hospital or something, I'll work with you. But if you tell me grandma's was in the hospital last week and that's why I didn't get it to talk to me ahead of time so I can help you. I can't help you afterwards, okay? And you don't have to do it immediately when grandma gets to the hospital. You can contact, shortly thereafter, but talk to me ahead of time, okay? Statement of academic integrity says don't cheat. Excessive error policy, I can send your work back to you if it's not done well. Classroom policies, ooh, 5. Read that, somebody.
Cell phones are not to be permitted
Loudly.
in class unless specifically authorized by your professor. If your cell phone rings, buzzes, or is even handled during class, you will receive a 0 for class participation as if you were not present. You can redeem yourself by bringing the entire class cookies in the next class period. Your cell phone is a negative externality, You get the benefit of communication, but you disturb the whole class with your cell phone, and that is just not fair.
Okay, so Brad, as you know, I like Nutter Butters, right? This happens to you, I
Absolutely.
believe.
Absolutely.
Okay, but it doesn't matter, you can bring your own or bake your own or whatever, okay? Now, page 13, this is the course overview. So here's what we see, last week was week 0, right? So that was reading Dr. K's article. This week is week 1, and what you'll see is when there's week 1, and then each class session is in white with a little black session whatever on it, okay? That's to help you know that that's where you're supposed to be, okay? And then so you're going to read Pfeffer, which you should have read, and the little article or little section from Pite. And then today we'll just talk about getting started, the use of power, class concepts journal by Wednesday. Next week, and then you'll just follow on. I've tried to streamline this as much as possible where it's easy for you to follow through. Look at the next page. The blacked out one on week 3, we are not here. Okay? That's why it's black. Okay? 2 weeks later, it's white again, so we're back in class. 2 weeks later, it's white again, we're back in class. 2 weeks later, it's white again, we're back in class. Okay? So gray out means you're not coming to class. Black means don't come to class. White means come to class.
I have a question.
Yes?
It might be, I thought I had an updated one, but you have the test on week 3 when we're not in class?
Do I?
Test 1 on week 5.
Is that what I just gave you?
I know, I printed
No, that's the other one.
it. So I don't have the updated one?
No, you do not. You do have the updated one.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, yeah, so there were those couple minor things that I sent out the other day that, yeah. Anybody else need one? I have one more.
Yes, please.
Okay, there we are.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions, comments, snide remarks about the syllabus?
Well, I'm sure we can come up with some snide.
I can't imagine. Okay, so course, class introductions, let's, since some of you don't know each other and you're gonna be needing to work in your groups, group A or B, let's say hello. So just say who you are, MA or MBA, where you work, anything else that grabs you that you want to share with the class. Don't filibuster, okay? We're gonna start over here.
All right. I see some familiar faces. I'm Ashley Griever. This is my second semester in the Master's in Organizational Leadership here. And I've had the pleasure of having him for every class so far. And I work for Ingevity, which is a performance chemicals and materials manufacturer here. You'll see it by 526. It's a chemical plant attached to a mill, which is a separate company, but right there.
Okay, next.
My name is Luciana. I'm a financial student from Brazil, and I have been living here for 5 years. I graduated from Sunville in July, business administration, and I started the MBA last semester. That's it.
Okay.
My name is Akia. I'm in the MA program. I work at Wells Fargo over on Ashley River Road in West Ashley. This is my second semester in the program. I went to CSU as well. My major was criminal justice and business administration.
Okay, next.
My name is Brad Orton. I'm State War. I'm in the MA program. I was an active duty Marine for 20+ years. My oldest daughter is a graduate of CSU in nursing. She celebrates her 2-year wedding anniversary today. My next daughter is getting married Saturday. So yeah, I'm the guy eating ramen noodles.
Okay.
I'm Emily Steele. I am in the MBA program. I'm about halfway through. I think I have 2 semesters left. I am a office manager at a nonprofit Christian counseling center. So do a little bit of like development, fundraising, but then also just regular like admin stuff. So that's it.
My name is Lila Castellano, and I'm also an MBA student, and I'm actually right on track with Emily, so I can still book it in December. Less than a year now. And I work here at Charleston Southern in admissions with transfer undergraduate students.
Oh, my name is Tyrone Brown. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Retired from the Army. I'm actually a recall manager for American Honda, so I take care of everybody recalls, especially the airbags. That's the main one. I'm also in the MA Organizational Leadership Program. I got to confirm this with Dr. Rollins, but I think I got 2 more semesters left. Other than that, happy to be here.
Mike Jelly. I'm in the MA program. I started last summer, so after this semester I'll be halfway done pretty much. I'm a graduate assistant for football operations here. So my job's been kind of interesting the past month or so. Head coach got hired. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.
My name is Frances Santiago. I am also from December. I am a practice manager at a bariatric and reflux practice based out of Somerville Medical Center. And I live in New York as well. I've been working for 13 years. My husband is former Navy, so that's what brought us here.
My name is Anna. I'm in the MA program. I'm sorry, I'm extra. I was talking about the view, but I can't like, I'll just go this.
All right.
But I'll be in December as well. MA, not MBA, but that's exciting. And I work as a server at a restaurant called Cantina 76, and if you haven't been there, you should, because it's like the best food. You guys have been there, you can say. It's delicious. Yeah, I
I didn't hear free in that. I heard come and leave me a big tip.
No, I might be able to sneak out some free chips or something. I can work on it. But yeah, that's all. I answered everything.
All right.
My name is Greg Yeoman. I did 6 years in the Navy. That's what brought me here. I work over at Joint Base Charleston at PSD. I'm a no-pay technician, and this is my second semester. Still early days.
My name is Amy York. I started with these girly pops last semester in the MA program here at Charleston Southern. And I am the director of a volunteer program with a nonprofit here in Charleston. We work in the countries Uganda and Nicaragua with doing healthcare.
Great. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm TJ Simmons. I'm considering the program here. I'm excited about jumping back into school. Coming back into school.
Everybody else is doing it.
That's right. Jump. Right. So I'm a chaplain on Joint Base Charleston. And so in the officership, you kind of have to make some harder decisions and take care of some folks. So I'd like to do that. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Which program are you considering?
You know, I don't, the organizational leadership, I'm looking forward to talking to Professor Brewer about what some options look like, and so.
Good. I can talk to you in my sleep about it. It's easy. So, okay, so everybody now knows each other. It's especially important that you start to spend some extra time with your group or your team A or team B. So now we're going to start with that just a little bit of you can dazzle and amaze me with what you have learned based on, remember whatever his name is, article, made an article here on trust. What grabbed you, what you learn, what you pull out of it. Don't all yell at once.
Please, they get to go first, right, if they want to?
Yeah, you get to go first if you want to.
If they choose that option?
The trust is based on the three perceptions: ability, benevolence, and integrity.
Good, and that's going to be the heart of what you should be bearing down into. Okay, so as you're looking for other trust articles, ability, ability, benevolence, and predictability. Right? No, integrity. Sorry, predictability was a fourth variable because he was comparing two different systems. But when you're looking at why do I trust you, not generalized trust, but why do I trust you? Generalized trust is our social. Societal trust is what it's called in some places in the literature, is that I just happen to be trusting. Well, why I trust you? And you've heard me say this in the last, if you were in 607 or 610 in the last semester or two, what did I say? If you have my back, you'll get my heart, right? That's the way, that's a fast road to it. You show me that you cared about me, and I'll go through a wall for you, okay? So that's the heart of it. You're right on track. Good. Hold on a second, I gotta put a number down here, a high number, preferably. Okay, all right. Who's next? Go ahead.
I think it's really important to, when you're understanding trust, it helps you be able to lead like Christ.
Okay, that's good. That it? Okay. Tell me, so that everybody can learn everybody else's name too. Say your name first before that. Not you don't. I know who you are, but so that everybody can get to know who.
Oh, that's great, by the way.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm Brad. I thought it was a painful read. I don't know if it was just me.
That's not helping.
I figured I would start with that to set the tone for the rest of y'all, because y'all all thought it was a painful read, not just me. But I'll say it out loud. The key there is trusting God is a key feature of the Christian walk. You just have to trust in God.
Okay. Go ahead.
I think it was, I think it was interesting because I know at least in my work life, a lot of people tend to lead with, they'll trust me because I'm competent versus.
Good. So you're onto something.
Yeah.
Because there's different types of trust.
Right.
And you're pulling that out. That's the kind of thing I need you to start pulling more of. There's a competence. I trust you because I know you have things together and you're smart. But if you're smart and I know you're going to throw me under the bus and say there's quickest opportunity so that you can climb the ladder, I'm not going to trust you anymore. There's a big difference between those two, right? Good. Pull it out.
And kind of how you make me feel is also a really important element.
Yep.
People may not often lead with that because they think it's what you know, but it's.
Yep. That's very good. So Maya Angelou said something like, you won't remember the things I said, but you'll always remember the way that I made you feel.
Right.
That's not a direct quote, but that's the spirit of it. It's very close. Okay, good, very good. Amy, did you have something to say?
Yeah, it was interesting to me to separate the two, but then to also kind of bring it back home to my experience. But effective trust, I love how it says it's important because it allows for short-term behavior problems to occur and to be forgiven. So it's all in the context of relationship.
Yes. So, and that's, I've been pounding the drums in every class about relationship, 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 leadership, relationship. Citizenship means you're, part of the state, right? You're a citizen of the state. Friendship, you're part of that friend group. Leadership, you're leading others. It's the others involved. If there's no others involved, it's not leadership, right? Same thing with relationship. It's always a relationship. Hold on, let me write that down before somebody else talks. Okay, who's next? Go ahead, Fred.
I think if you're going to talk about what is trust, you have to go back to what it says, definition and importance. 3 different lenses to look at it through. Is it a personality trait, a behavioral intention, or is it characteristic? Before you start defining it, you have to put it into the proper optic that you want to look at it from.
Okay,
Which one is it going to be?
good.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Well, and that brings up the 2 kind, the cognitive and the affective, which the way I kind of took it, like cognitive is a little more transactional.
Okay.
And
But cognitive is what Ashley was talking about. I'm confident, that's why they follow me, that's why they trust me. That's more cognitive.
yeah.
Effective is, you've demonstrated that you had my back. I know that you're not going to throw me under the bus at your first opportunity when it helps you.
Yeah, and it's from the heart.
And honestly, I'd rather follow a less competent person who's not going to throw me under the bus, right? I'll help steer you even, right? I'll do right by you as long as I know that you're looking out for me. Good. Okay, who's next? That was Emily, right? Okay, go ahead.
So I also...
Say your name for other people.
My name is Lila.
I know who you are.
Hello, Lila.
Hello. I'm glad to see you in class again. So, I also immediately applied it to my own office and people that I work with and things as well. And then in interaction with what we read next in the Power book, it was really interesting to read through this and think about trust, but then also like how you can use it to manipulate people, because I know how people around me
Very good.
and
It's interesting that you thought of that.
I don't think I manipulate people, but reading the Power book, I'm like, dang it.
Yeah, no, but Pepper's all over that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was just kidding about that. It was interesting you
Well,
thought of that. But that's a very good point. Okay, excellent. Go ahead.
Also looking at that
Name?
Anna's my name. The other article that we read talking about intuition, and the very first thing that struck me when we were talking about the difference between cognitive and emotional and intuition and everything is where's the Holy Spirit? Because depending on our own intuition can lead us down. Like if I come to your class for the first time and I say, I'm going to trust this professor, I may or may not be right about that if I'm not dependent on the Holy Spirit to discern that for me.
Right.
So that was my first takeaway.
Yeah, and so, and we've talked about this in other ways before, but a lot of the leadership literature, like in 607, we talked about how, why we ordered the books in the order we did. Because when Cousins and Posner is saying, just look in, well, not exactly, right? And what's Jeremiah say about your heart being depraved? Okay, so if you get the other things like the steward leader bit down and that kind of thing in place first, and you have God in the right place in your life, then once you get to that, looking in is okay. If you're dealing with the Holy Spirit in there and you're trying to wrestle with it, right? That's a different place to be than when you just look inside. Every Disney movie's telling you the same thing, right? Find the answers within. No, that's wrong. That's not it. I have six kids. If anybody didn't know that, I have 6 kids, so I'm well acquainted with Disney movies, and they all tend to come out like that. So you're right. You're exactly right with that. Okay, next. Anybody else? Go ahead.
The most intriguing part I found from the paper was when they talked about gaining trust through benevolence.
Okay.
And, just because I think the people that I have found to trust the most, specifically in my profession, like with coaches and stuff, I found the people that I trust the most are the ones that get down and get their hands dirty with me. Like, you got coaches that get paid $100,000 a year, and you got some that are just like, oh, you're a GA, you're going to do the dirty work, and I'm not going to help you. I'm just going to watch you do it because I got more important stuff to do. but I trust the coaches more and I actually gain more respect for them. And they kind of lead by example when they get down and dirty with me.
I think that's excellent, one, and I think that's the case with most of us, right? I mean, look at the 4 factors here. Predictability, ability, this is page 8, by the way. Predictability, ability, benevolence, and integrity, right? Which of those, if you could only have one from them, you want predictability, ability, benevolence, or integrity?
Integrity.
Integrity?
Yeah.
Integrity? I want benevolence. Okay, even if you're shady, even if you're not going to do exactly right, I want to know that you want my back, or you're going to take care of me in the process, and I can help you steer it to integrity. I'll be there for you. If you're there for me, I'm going to help you, right? Now, it's not like I don't want integrity, right? But I do want to know that you're not going to sacrifice me needlessly for your own agenda. That's what we mean when we're talking about where we are in the benevolence. Ability, I really don't care. I mean, I do want you to have ability. I really do, but if I have to sacrifice something, and I'll help push, I'll help you, right? Predictability, that's really, look, predictability is even when you have a bad boss, if you can predict what he's going to do, there's something comforting about that. Like knowing, no, seriously, knowing, okay, if I do this, he's going to yell and read me the riot act, so, you know, right? So even though reading the riot act isn't a good thing, so you want all 4 of those things, no question, but if you could only have one, you got to be, you know, right? So I'm right there with you on that. Okay, who's next? Anybody else? Go ahead.
Kia, well, what I was looking at was just the whole effective-based trust. From that, I just immediately thought of like action. And like he was saying, like actions speak louder than words. So just Mike, right? Like how Mike was saying, like, you know, they actually get down and they, you know, they do things with him. They get their hands dirty with him. So I feel like knowing that you tell me this and you actually do, seeing you actually do it, keeping your word, you know, I feel like that brings a lot as far as trust. Because you can say something all day long and not do it, and it doesn't mean nothing. That way, next time you say it, I'm not going to believe anything you say. So,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I just feel like action is what I'm getting from, especially
Effective, you mean?
trust, yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't that describe your supervisor that was doing so much for you?
Yep,
Right? That we talked about all semester,
yep.
right?
And she
Great
left-
examples.
Then she left me. but
And then
it's-
she left you. She got promoted.
She got promoted.
I bet there's a reason why she got promoted.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I mean, this might not necessarily need to be pointed out since you did make it fairly clear, but I noticed a difference between Kay's article and then the other one. How do you say the other one?
Which other one?
H-A-I-T.
Height? Yeah, he's a professor at UVA, I think.
His was just much,
NYU. He was at one and went to the other. I don't remember which. He was, yeah.
just a more secular foundation.
Oh, yeah.
And then with Dr. Kay's, he provided those biblical examples to show how Jesus did lead it with ability.
Yeah.
Like that is, we obviously know Jesus did have ability, but also with benevolence and integrity as well as predictability. To a certain extent, we can't always predict God, but we could predict that we could trust him. And I liked some of the examples he chose to give throughout.
Okay. All right. So if anybody has not spoken, this is your time. You have 10 seconds to do it. Okay, good. You do. Okay. So I got to move on to other things. Go ahead.
I applied it to my own professional experience, so I'm kind of in a new leadership role, so I'm past the kind of getting to know you, building rapport phase, and it's more about evaluating everybody's skill sets. And I really could resonate with the organizational learning and the cognitive phase because I had to kind of define who I can coach up or coach out because they were all about the talk, but when it came down to actually doing the work and doing things differently, getting away from that's the way we do things and moving forward to embracing new ideas,
Okay.
I really found value and that's another way to gain trust
Okay.
with my leaders.
Go ahead.
Tyrone, it's pretty much elaborating what everybody already stated. Just going back from experience reading this, you have your leaderships or your managers that actually knew everything, like from point A to point Z, and you're like, wow, you know, I can really trust this person. However, they can also flip it on you, whereas they feel that being that they know everything, they don't need you. So.
Okay, so that might interact with part of the, another part of what's leading to trust and maybe take away some of that trust.
Right. So,
Right?
Exactly. So it kind of flips story because now he's telling his boss, well, I can pretty much do everything. I don't need to lay in confidence.
Have you ever had a manager that just listened to you and then, like, if you had a good idea, they listened and then just implemented it? Isn't that amazing of an experience? No, I'm not kidding. I mean, we're laughing, but isn't that amazing? Right? Whoa, they took it to, right? And what do? You're like, hey, well, what if we do this? And what, right? You get all excited trying to do, because you want things to work around you. Like, nobody's like, yeah, I hope my organization's terrible. I mean, very few people, I'm sure, think like that, right? So you want things to work, and when they listen, wow, they listened and they did something with it. That's such a wonderful experience. But then, what you just described, we've all had that kind of experience too, right? Yeah, sure, they know what's going on. Well, I did the job 25 years ago. You weren't on the internet 25 years ago. Things change.
Exactly.
Right? So it can work different ways. That's a good example. Okay, we have to keep moving on, but this is the model that he had here from Mayer and others. So ability, benevolence, and integrity, leading to trust. And so again, these things, how do they interact with each other? That's what we're going to be looking at. Now, for that, we have these. Can you two pass one of these up each? Right? Okay, now these are not for you to study for testing in here. It's for you to get a handle on some of the concepts, especially related to ability, benevolence, and trust, and then start reading through, use a lit review to find other articles, because now what I'm asking you to do in this is every time we meet together, you should have, by some point before we got to class, posted somewhere that nobody stepped up to say, I want to lead and found the forum. Nobody said that yet. That's interesting. And I was hoping for maybe a 4 on here, but nobody said that. I don't know when somebody's going to say that. I need somebody to create a forum where they can post this stuff, but nobody has stepped up and said, I want to lead and show you that I can really lead and influence. But I'm hoping that I hear that soon.
Let's create a forum where we can all collaborate.
Good idea, actually.
Okay, now let's create a book. But I volunteer to, that's what I was hoping for.
Astrid, can you do it?
Oh, there you go.
I got it.
Amy's got it. That's the first 4. 4s are very, very rare. Okay. Yeah. 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 3. See, that's going well above and beyond. Okay, so what these articles are for is to prime the pump so that you see something interesting along the way in the article where you say, wow, I'm going to go to the references, look up that article, find that, that's fodder for these. And then you just keep repeating that trick, because when you get into another article, somewhere along the way something will trigger something that's useful, that is going to help us understand trust, specifically this part of the equation of trust. Okay? Yes?
And that's what we're all gathering.
And that's what we're all gathering for, and then when we have time in class, you're going to tell me about that very quickly, much more quickly than we did tonight, because that took too long. Okay? But nonetheless, and then I will start giving you some numbers. Okay? Got it? All right. So let's keep moving. So this is what the survey will look like. Again, I was talking to, let's do this later rather than forward, because it'll have a different experience, and I think that Professor's right. So we're not going to take a break, because it's way too soon for the break. But here's where we're going to start. A little thought experiment. What do leaders do to influence others? Let's answer that question first. We're in a class called Power and Influence, after all, right?
They build trust.
They build trust. That's a very good answer.
Set an example.
Set an example.
I was just saying the best leadership that I've ever seen is when they actually meet you where you're at, they care about you.
Good. They descend from on high to help you where you are.
They don't like nitpick you, they'll actually ask how you are, not like what you're doing.
Building that personal relationship.
Right.
Relationships.
Without actually getting too much in your stuff.
Is that the technical term? Getting too much in your stuff?
I was looking for the appropriate word now that I'm back in class.
Okay.
Do you want to
This is rehab. We'll help you acclimate back to society. Okay, yes. Go ahead.
I would say even a step further than meeting you where you are, but almost like pulling you you up to the next step.
Yeah, train you.
Good.
Telling you to come to the next step.
Good. A good leader should be interested in your growth. Leadership is about others and others' growth, right? By nature, that's what we're trying to do. Okay, what else?
Make decisions.
They make decisions.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of decisions he was just talking about where, I know what this is, I'm going to make decisions. Decision making is my job. Right? That's terrible. I don't want that.
Exactly.
I've just been in several contexts where nobody makes a decision and nobody actually makes a move happen. And
Okay.
so I'm really grateful when a person just has the confidence to step up and be like, all right, guys, we've been talking about where we're gonna go eat for this long. We're going here, you know, to make something happen.
Okay? There's that. Now there's the other end of the, I mean, there's a continuum too. You don't want that and you don't want the other thing. Every time you get a chance to tell her, I'm commanding you to go do, right? And nobody likes that. Right? Go ahead.
They know like when to step back and let others lead.
Okay.
Like trust that they have like encouraged them enough to take that step.
Okay?
And on top of that, they should actually want it. They shouldn't want their followers to be dependent on their leadership. They should actually want their followers to become leaders themselves.
Okay? Yeah, that's good. You're not trying to create followers who are dependent on you. If you're trying to create people that are dependent on you, you're psycho, because that's not good.
Right.
I mean, it's not healthy. I have 6 kids. I don't want them to be dependent. I want them to grow up and leave me alone. Right? I mean, I want them to visit, but I want them to grow up and not, I mean, oh, did I tell you? No, I didn't tell you because I didn't see it yet. I bought the greatest Christmas present ever, and that is a doorknob with a key fob. So a doorknob to my bedroom door with a key fob where I can be lying in bed and when comes 73 times every night or more, something like that. So, right? So 6 kids rotating through, coming for various things because they're bored, right? I can go zzz, and let them in. Because if I don't do that, if I don't lock the door, they all swarm in like flies, right? And so this I can control now, and I don't have to get up. Now, I'm gonna blow up like a balloon, because that was half my exercise, getting up out of bed to go unlock the door, and, right, every day. But that was the greatest thing ever, so I highly suggest that. That was free, has nothing to do with the class. I don't know how I got on that. Who else has a good idea about why leaders do what they do?
They foster effective problem solving.
How did I get on that, by the way? There was something that somebody said, who was just talking?
I just said, you want people to be
No, you don't want them to be followers forever, depending on you forever. That's how I got there, okay. I didn't just pull it out of nowhere. Okay, so go ahead.
Recognize and reward.
Okay, recognize and reward. Yeah, that's a big part of it, right? What else?
Facilitate the open communication up and down both ways.
Good. What else?
I think the leader guide the followers, but let them doing their way.
Say the first part, because I heard to let them doing it their way, but the first part I missed.
The leader guides the followers.
Guides the followers, but lets them do it their way. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, so if you don't let them do it that way, they don't grow. And if the goal is growth. Now, the second part was, why do they do what they do? And that's really tricky. Because let's go back to what you said, what they did. Okay, who talked in the last question? Okay, what do they do? You just said.
They facilitate the communications up and down.
Yeah, but they can do that for a good reason or a bad reason.
Absolutely.
They can do it to be the bottleneck that it has to go through them, or they can do it to actually make it flow. Right? Who else talked?
I said that they move out the way so that.
They can move out of the way because they're lazy, or they can move out of the way. No, seriously, they can. I actually like lazy bosses because they don't get in my way. Right? I appreciate lazy. Okay? They can do it for that reason, or because they're actually trying to get out of the way. What did you say?
I built on that and said, you don't want them to be dependent on you.
Dependent, right? And they can build dependency accidentally because they're trying to help you, or, and that's unfortunate, or they can build dependency because I want to keep them in my power, right? It's 2 different things.
Some leaders, they actually strive on training you up to see you move up, and it gives them this sense of pride.
Yeah, that's right. That's what they should be. That's healthy. That's normal.
Exactly.
I don't want my kids not to be able to tie their shoes forever. I want them to move that along, right? Anybody else? Go ahead.
Mine was growth and like mentorship, like giving them the step up.
That one, I mean, it's hard to say that there's an evil way for that. I mean, that's like the point. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Go ahead.
I said recognize and reward because you're passionate.
That one's really prone to being manipulated.
Yeah.
Especially the rewarding. And rewarding is just the opposite side of punishing. You know that, right? I mean, so rewarding can be manipulated just about as well as anything else. So you got to be real careful with that. Were you going to say something else?
Well, just why you do it, because you're passionate about, if you're the leader and you're passionate about what you're doing in your organization, it tends to be influential and contagious,
Yeah.
if you will. And for that to be the core reason of why you do what you do is something that
Good.
Yeah, excuse me.
Good. So this could be good or bad, and it might work or it might backfire. Like we said, you could be trying to help them and you're actually enabling bad things. Or it could be completely effective or ineffective. So, they thank you for every effort. Why? Well, because they know that you know more than they do. That's good. They thank you for every effort. Why? Well, because they're trying to ingratiate themselves because they're evil and twisted. Well, that could be different. Okay? So it depends on why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, so welcome to, this is, again, Power and Influence, the Leader's Shop. It looks like this. Okay? It's like a tune-up, taking everything that you've learned all the way through now and taking it and kind of working on different systems. Just like your car has different systems, like the AC as opposed to fuel injection as opposed to something else. Here we're just looking at power and influence and we're just trying to tweak it, make sure it's working right. Because this is something that can be really manipulated. And please don't take what we're talking about here and manipulating it. You're playing with fire right now. And fire is good when it's in a controlled area like a hearth. It's bad on the rug, right? So you got to be really careful with that. So we're going to start with this. Some principles that we're going to start with before we get into anything about power and influence. Okay? So here are my suggested principles. If you want to add anything else, this is nowhere in the material. This is just, let's talk about it. Okay? I think we should agree to a certain set of things. So for example, I would say the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Okay, that's kind of how we'll start. We're not going to take anything that we're learning here and go, yeah, let me go and they sure showed me how to manipulate people with this. I'm going to go do that, right? No, you're not going to do that, right? Okay, can we agree to that? Yeah? Okay, good. Apply the golden rule to the others. If you don't want to be treated that way, don't use this to treat other people that way. Fair enough? Good? Yeah, okay. Add value. Generally, if you add value wherever you go, you will do well. Okay, so I'm just throwing that in because that's just kind of business school stuff talking, telling me do that. Okay? Embrace that which causes human flourishing. Now, there might be an exception for, say, Brad. Marines sometimes cause less than human flourishing where they go, but that's for a greater purpose of human flourishing. So thank you for what you do to devastate areas quickly. We appreciate that. But in general, as far as what we're talking about here in power and influence, we want to say something that's causing flourishing, not something that's causing demise. Or we reject lying, cheating, deceiving, those kind of things that are part and parcel. As you read in the first couple of chapters with Pfeffer, his moral compass is a little stuck, right? We want to reject anything that binds, addicts, dehumanizes, or enslaves other people, right? I think that I would have a hard time being involved in any business that would be doing that to other people. Even if I was making great profit on it, I would want to be able to have a clean conscience before my mate, right? And then we reject that which is contrary to any clear biblical teaching. That should be a no-brainer with what we're doing here. If we can agree to this, we can move on. Does anybody want to add anything to this kind of thing? This is not something that you're going to be tested on or anything, but I think we ought to have some kind of premise about, because we're going to be dealing with some weird stuff here. Right?
Thank you for things.
Yeah, no, I mean, we should be doing that, especially here. I mean, if we're not doing it here, where's it going to be done? Right? Okay. Anybody else want to add anything to that? I think it's a pretty good list. It's not perfect necessarily, but we want to orient ourselves first before we go on. I would also add reject the use of force where other means are available. If you can, Brad's smiling here. Marines don't count if you're supposed to. I mean, that's like your whole game. Okay? But I mean, if I have to coerce you into doing something, you really don't have free will. Something went wrong in the equation generally. God's a gentleman, right? And he stands at the door of your heart and knocks. He doesn't kick it in, right? You have the right to tell the God of the universe, nope, I don't want you. You do it. You have that right. So if he's not going to force you, certainly you shouldn't be doing that. Oh, as much as I would want you to accept him, I'm not going to twist your arm and make you. Okay? Why do I have this here?
Elephant and rider.
The elephant and the rider. Tell me about that. Height.
The elephant is kind of your everyday decision maker.
Mhm.
It's your running your errands, doing your normal life, habits, things that are built in. The rider is actually your brain, the decision maker.
Uh-huh.
You can control a giant beast, but generally that giant beast is going to
You've
lead
got
the way.
much bigger vision, the rider.
Yeah, he does.
You know,
And theoretically, the rider is supposed to be doing what? He's reason, and he's supposed to be doing what? He's supposed to be driving, but what happens? In practicality, very often, it's the elephant kind of going his way, right? There's a Christian philosopher named Dennis Peacock who talked about the heart, the mind justifies, the mind justifies what the heart has chosen. Whoa, I think there's something to that.
I thought that was something like that. Was
The mind justifies what the heart has chosen. Yeah, and that's kind of what's going on here. He's really a figurehead. The elephant really wants to go left. He's not going to make it go right. Right? Okay, what else did you take away from height? Anything else? It's an important concept to start with because economists lie to you. They talk about economan, the rational, what is it, homo economicus, right? You don't operate like that. I mean, that works well for theory, but it doesn't actually work in practice most of the time. Okay? And your heart is not only what drives most of the time, but it's also deceptive. So be careful. It's telling you that yes, you're in charge, like your wife is, gentlemen. Right? Okay, go ahead.
One of the things, kind of like you were speaking of, that I highlighted is that we make our first judgments rapidly, and we are dreadful at seeking out evidence that might disconfirm those initial judgments.
Okay, you ever been in a Facebook fight?
Yeah, we fall in love with our idea, and you're not changing your mind.
Yeah, that's right, because it's this way, right? How many of you ever had your mind changed in a Facebook fight? Show of hands. Why? Huh? An argument on Facebook with somebody, like a political argument or something, how many of you had your mind changed? There's a reason for that. It's what we just saw here, right? You're looking for confirming evidence that shows the way that you've already decided things are. Right? Go ahead.
This almost reminds me of the book we read last semester talking about being in the box.
Yeah, leadership and self-deception.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we do let the elephant lead when we're in the box.
Mhm.
And that's how we justify.
Okay. So that's going to lead us into all kinds of potential problems because we think we're there and we're really getting driven around by there. Okay? Okay. Go ahead, Brad.
Just reading again from their quote there, if you want to change people's minds, you've got to talk to their elephant.
That's right. In the same way that when you're leading people, don't lead with, I have this 5-point plan. Right? And follow this 5-point plan. Oh, what did Dr. King say? I have a dream. He's appealing to your heart. Right? What would have happened if he got up and said, I have a 5-point plan? Right? Yeah, no, right? So it comes down to that. It's relational, it's talking to the emotions. Not that the mind needs to be bypassed, it needs to be talked to too, okay? But the emotions are where the action is. Okay, back to where we are. So when we get into, and we're about to get into the book, for real, I'm not kidding, okay? We're almost there, to actual work. So the weekly class concepts journal, okay? You'll see in the corner of any of my PowerPoints, this little R, the prescription thing, right? If you see that, I've just asked something that's related to your class journal. So as you're answering the class journal questions and you're following along, working through that, we'll have answers until we can get right into things, okay? So it's set up that way. Here are the books: Pfeffer, Power, Cialdini's Influence, Zigarelli's Influencing Like Jesus, and Powell's It Worked For Me. Okay, so I'm not sure if let's take a break before we actually get to it. Okay, let's take a 10, 12-minute break. So we're back at 7:20 according to that clock.
Team B, who's on Team B?
There you go.
Here to be the forum leader, so something odd.
Yeah, all you have to do is set up a forum and have a house in place for, that was good.
No, I didn't understand
Oh,
what we're doing, what the.
So, you're gonna have to bring 2 pieces of research in each class, okay? That highlights something about trust. That's what we're gonna ask you to do each week, okay? That's above and beyond the research that we'll do, right? But you're gonna bring 2 pieces of research. Now, you're not just looking for any piece of research. You are looking for something that is going to meaningfully help us understand some part of something about trust. Go ahead.
each session or
Each session.
Okay.
Each class, each time we get together in class, right? Not every week, you don't have to post
That's
it.
a-
But then we'll fire this up, and if you want to speak from that, and, you know, here's the reference, and here's a little bit about it on that forum, then you can feel free to post it there, and, you know, we can, I guess, say, here's week 3 or week 5's, or week 7's or whatever, and just post it on there so that it's a place, it's somewhere where we have a repository. Now that helps because then you can look at each other's stuff and start to, you know, go into their set and see if you can find other things that relate to something or whatever. Okay? But again, this is all you, this is your individual effort, so there's no hiding, but it's not a class project where you have to worry about, well, is he doing his job or is she doing, you don't have to worry about that. That's not, I mean, that part's taken out. Now you just have to make sure that you're bringing something really good to the table. Okay, go ahead.
So it's for thought on things for us finding our 2 articles and putting it up?
To place, somewhere to place it so that we have it there. That's where that's where I'm gonna want you to post everything, so that you have that, and then I'm just gonna check you off on this list as we're talking. Go ahead.
And maybe I'm beating this one dead, maybe everyone understands it me. So I'm finding 2 research articles that bring value to the class. I'm putting it in the form that she established.
Correct?
Are we discussing those articles? Am I
Yes, we're gonna
critiquing
discuss
am
those.
Am I offering up something other than the article itself?
Yeah, so I would put the article and maybe a little synopsis about, or a quote that you found that was really useful, or something that, right? But you're trying to add value to this discussion.
So
Okay.
I'll create a Google Drive, is basically what it's gonna do. And then I'll email everyone probably tomorrow or the next few days and get your Google email, and then add you to it so you have access to it. So
Okay.
just be in the link.
That's good, we've clarified that. Anything else, any other issues that we need to talk about?
So there's no personal discussion.
No, this isn't Team A or Team B or anything along those lines, this is just you individually, but you wanna make sure that's getting there.
And then in class, we're gonna access.
We'll put it up on here, make me part of your thing, and I'll just pull it up regularly and we'll talk about it.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah?
Gotcha.
Okay?
I thought it was something we had to post on the discussion board, but we're using the Google Drive. I got it.
I'm kind of like a druggie for ahas, I like new, interesting ideas,
Right.
okay? And so that's your goal, is to give me oh, that's an aha, I didn't think about that or that thing before, right? Okay, that's your ambition, okay?
It's not gonna be like a
Scholarly, peer-reviewed journal, not something you got out of Google or a book or whatever else, yeah.
Even if you're reading like another leadership book,
Probably not.
or it's not exactly leadership, but something kind of related.
There are some good things there, go to scholarly peer-reviewed research.
Or scripture.
TMC.
Scripture can help, but that doesn't count as one of your 2. One of your 2 could say this, and then, by the way, Scripture also says X that relates to it, that's okay, but the article is what I'm looking for, okay? And it shouldn't contradict Scripture either, that probably wouldn't be. Okay, what else? Anything else before we move along?
Could you talk about teams?
Okay, so your teams are only used for your discussion boards. Were you here when we handed out the elements of power?
Yes.
Okay, so when you're doing that individually, and then as a team, you're gonna be interacting with each other to kind of try to help you along. So you'll have certain insights that Brad won't have and vice versa, which you can use each other's experience to enhance each other. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm looking at for part B of each of these, the quality of what you tell them. Make sense? Okay. Anybody else? All right, let's move into Pfeffer. What do you think of Pfeffer in general?
I felt uneasy.
You felt uneasy?
Yeah, I don't know. It just
That's
felt-
good, but it should feel worse. It's not just uneasy.
Yeah, I mean, certain parts, yeah, I'm like, I don't agree with.
Good, that's positive, because he has no moral compass.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was kind of disgusted.
Yeah, as well you should be.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
Well, it's sad because he's not wrong about certain things.
Good. Elaborate. Go ahead.
Just the whole concept of, we want to live in this just world, it all goes back to the Garden of Eden and the world that we were meant to live in, and we don't.
Okay.
So that's because we separate from God. So this idea of, we live in this just world, that's our soul telling us this is the world we wish we lived in.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just not actually accurate.
Good. She was also saying, yeah, about Pfeffer. What else?
Well, it was more about how it is the world we live in, the reality, because I found a lot of it is really applicable.
Does it work? Yeah. What he's going for is, here's what works if you want to seize power.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what you ought to be doing.
No,
Probably
Okay.
similar, but that is guidelines that Hitler used.
Yeah, okay, so, well, not exactly Hitler, but nonetheless.
You know what I mean,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so, now he starts in a fairly decent place. He starts with motivation to managers, and if you remember this from 610, this is McClellan, affiliation, achievement, and power. And we all kind of line up differently on that. And some people are motivated by achievement, they're gonna make your best salesmen. Affiliation are gonna make your best sales managers. And power are gonna be people who scare you, who are in charge of stuff. Okay? But people who are attracted to power, they actually, they'll gravitate to it. They'll statistically be much more likely to be in positions of power. Okay? There's this third group of managers primarily interested in powers that were the most effective at becoming powerful. Right? That's what he's looking at. Okay? So there's a little prescription sign in the corner. So that tells me that when we're in class, that I asked a question somewhere related to it in your questions, right? Which means that you should have the questions out, and you should be looking at them, which I don't see a lot of people having the questions out. Okay, good. Okay, so tell me, what was the question that I asked?
As a leader, as a leader, I should be interested in the use and acquisition of power.
Is that true?
Yes.
Sure. How are you going to handle it? Because leadership comes naturally with power. That's part of the package, right? But it's how you handle it that's the issue. So what else about this? So how do you answer this, the rest of you? You can just call out. You don't have to raise hands. Just talk.
It immediately made me think of Jesus as a man, because he not denied, but
No, he laid it down.
left behind his power as God to become man first.
Mild he lay his glory by, or something like that in the Christmas Carol,
Yes.
right? Set it aside.
So
Okay.
if we're going to be an image of him, that's something to take into consideration.
Okay.
when seeking power.
What else? Everybody's really interested in looking down all of a sudden, which is telling me somebody won't have answers. Who has answers?
Well, I just kind of said that, to me, it's more important to have influence than power.
Okay, and that's a good observation as well. Now I don't think, you don't necessarily need to split it that way, but I'm glad you did, because I'm glad that you're thinking that way, right? There's a difference between trying to coerce people. That's what power is, coercion, right? It's force. There's a difference between trying to coerce others and trying to influence and persuade them. Okay, what else? Anybody?
I also felt highly uncomfortable and didn't like it. Because I know it is effective.
Uh-huh.
And so the temptation is there
Sure.
to use power, but then it's also like you have to in some cases. Yeah.
Right? Okay? That's right. It's alluring power, right? Okay, what else? One more? Anybody? Before I call on Brad. You got nothing? Should leaders be interested in the acquisition of power?
Absolutely.
Some people are over-interested and that becomes a problem, right?
Should be interested in how your power and how you're dealing with it, and I guess just looking at it in my personal life is kind of put yourself in check. If you're in a position of power, how are you dealing with it on a daily basis? How are you wielding that sword?
Mhm.
Is it staying in its sheath until absolutely needed, or are you just wielding it every single day?
You mean you got nothing? That's eloquent, right? You should. I wish other people had nothing like that. Okay. All right, political skills. People who had more political skills received higher performance evaluations and were rated as more effective leaders. Right? Doesn't mean their job was any better, but because they had political skills or used political skills, they got around and shook hands a lot. They were rated as.
Shake a lot of hands and kiss a lot of ugly babies.
Okay, so the question here, what was the question?
I think it might still be going off the same question.
Was it? Was it related to the same thing?
Because it's also page 5.
Okay. What do you think of this?
I mean, to a certain extent, we need to be aware of the political world we live in.
Yeah.
Anyways.
You can't have your head in the sand. Does that mean you should polish your political skills so that you can be more highly elevated in the eyes of?
I think you should, because for us to deny, as she says, for us to deny that that's a part of the world that we live in, we're kidding ourselves, and we're only doing a detriment to our team and to our family and to whoever we're serving. That if I just want to be a guy and say, okay, I'm just going to get my on Brad's merit every single day, to heck with what other people think of me, and I'm not going to socialize with them, I'm not going to be a team player, I'm not going to be a political person. I think we're kidding ourselves, and then there's a tipping point there to where.
Good.
Now I went over.
You took away my butt.
Now I'm just kissing backsides, and just I'm.
So if it becomes all that, so what is excellence? Excellence isn't just doing your job, it's also not being abrasive in the process of doing your job, right? Being helpful to others, adding value, those kind of things are all part of excellence. That could be part of what is political skills, but it doesn't have to, but if political skills only become the driving force of that, that's a very different world. That tipping point you said is where I was waiting for you to stop so I could say, but, which you took away from me. Okay, very good. Did you want to add anything else? Are you just going to go out on a high note?
I'll rest.
Okay, very good. Okay, powers related to a longer, healthier life.
I was
How about that?
surprised by that.
Yeah, why?
I should have my whole family, I just was. Because normally when I think of power, I think of stress, and I think about just deposition stress and all the things that, the 80-hour weeks and all those things that bring an unhealthy life. And I actually highlighted it and I shared it with my whole family. Did you know that?
Yeah, but what if you could displace that stress on all your people? Right? And I just tell you what to do and I kick back and relax.
I guess it
Right?
depends on how much your conscience affects your stress.
Okay, that's fair. I'm not saying do that by any means,
What's the
right?
difference between a manager and a leader? Because
Good.
that's how you using power differently too. I mean.
Good. Okay, you were going to say?
What I did like what he said is, because it made sense to me, it's kind of how my personality is when he was talking about being in control, helps with your health.
Sure.
And for me, the more control I have at the workspace, the less stuff I have to worry about.
Good, and that's right. And we all want to control what we're doing, our own little niche, our own little corner of the world. Go ahead.
Although he's an author, I will still a lot disagree. I think just because when I've been in a position of power, the weight that I felt of that obligation just wasn't always a healthy thing.
What was the job?
When I was deployed with Marines.
Okay, but I think that's a little different because the weight that you're supposed to feel under that circumstance is different than what he's probably talking about, an executive in a high-rise.
I don't know, maybe I'm always just taking my work life a little too.
I'm glad that you felt that weight of obligation because people are probably still alive because of that, right? But that's not what he's probably talking about here. He's probably talking about a VP or executive kind of something who's in charge, who's now turning the screws on their lower level people to. You should be thinking that way, and I'm glad you were, but that's not what he was talking about here, right? Now, here's some interesting things that go with that. There are studies that show, for example, that if you have a good relationship with your direct manager, that's very good for your health. If you have a bad relationship with your direct manager, it's the equivalent of eating fast food and smoking every day. That's what it's doing to your heart. That bad relation, that toxic relationship. Get out of that job. Okay? So there's other things very related to that, other peer-reviewed academic research that confirms this kind of thing. So they live longer, but they're passing that stress. They're very often passing that stress down to others. Okay. Oh, by the way, another piece of research that goes along with this is you're talking about job control, right? You know what profession tends to have the greatest longevity and lifespan and best health? Conductors. Yeah, they're telling other people what to do all day long, right? There's a reason for that. I mean, they have they're completely in control of whatever's going on the whole time, right? Okay, Dilbert. We like Dilbert.
It's been a few hours since I've done anything managerial. I could criticize someone. No. I could have a meeting. No. I'm reorganizing the department.
Excuse me while I beat myself with my keyboard.
But don't people get into a management position and think, I've got to do something now.
Yeah.
Let me think, what can I do? I'm going to reorganize. No, reorganization almost never turns out to be the magic bullet. Sometimes it's a useful thing, but if that's going to be the thing that's going to turn you around, it's probably not going to turn you around because you probably have other factors involved. Cost of a bad boss. Let's play this.
Minute MBA, true cost of a bad boss. 3 out of 4 working Americans say their boss is the most stressful part of their job. 44%
Let me stop there for a
verbally,
second.
emotionally, or physically abused by a
Come back
supervisor
out to
or
that in a
boss at
second.
some point in their career. And 31% of workers say their boss just doesn't.
They said 3 out of 4.
Or working Americans say their boss is the most stressful part of their job.
You ever experienced that?
That's
Show of
why
hands, who has had your boss being the most stressful part of the job? Isn't that a shame? Your boss, what's his name, Tom Peters, talks about your job as a leader is to be the chief hurdle removal officer. That's right. That's exactly right. You're supposed to be clearing the way for them so they can get their job done. Not doing it for them, but not being the impediment either. Right? Chief hurdle removal officer.
44% say they've been verbally, emotionally, or physically abused by a supervisor or boss at some point in their career. And 31% of workers say their boss just doesn't appreciate them. Sounds like a big group of whiners, doesn't it? Actually, employees with subpar management have the right to complain. And this dissatisfaction is costing businesses and the American economy big money. The economy. Bad working relationships between management and employees cost the economy $360 billion each year from lost productivity. Fake sick days, dawdling because of low motivation, and purposefully making mistakes out of spite are all direct results of a bad boss, and it costs the economy big bucks. Health is at stake. Anyone who's ever had a bad boss knows they can't just shake them off when they turn in their 2 weeks' notice. In fact, it takes people 22 months to restore their stress levels to a healthy range after a bout of terrible boss. Also, people who are stuck working for someone horrible are more susceptible to chronic stress, depression, and anxiety, which all increase the risk of a lowered immune system, colds, strokes, and even heart attacks. All those sick days and visits to the doctor, acupuncturist, massage therapist, and psychologist are costing companies a pretty penny in health costs and lost work days. Last but not least, a bad boss produces some very real costs in the form of recruitment costs, lost productivity during new hire training, and in cases that escalate, legal fees. One organization who did the math on real money lost in a year because of one boss's bad repertoire with employees added up to a whopping $160,000, well above the average managerial salary in many industries.
What do you think? Any of that resonate?
Oh, yeah, that's why the retention is so low in certain jobs, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
They spend so much money training that person, and then they, you know, the person quits. All that money that they put into that person to train, you know, the company loses out, you know, because of that particular boss or bosses.
Okay,
You know.
when we say bad boss, it means different things to different people. What's it mean to you? Most of you had your hand up, so most of you can answer.
Controlling.
Controlling.
Yeah.
The bane of my graduate students' existence is micromanagement. Why do they micromanage?
They don't
Don't
trust you.
trust?
That trust.
Did you say trust? That's right, they don't trust you.
Right.
That's often the case. And if you fear that I'm not going to be able to do the job because I don't trust you, or I'm not going to get, you know, my approval from my boss because I don't trust you, then what do? I spend more time micromanaging, right? What else?
Or they think they're like Dilbert. They're like, oh, I gotta be a manager. So
I gotta go do something.
I gotta do something, yeah.
Go ahead.
Also boredom. When my managers are bored, they just come around and
Yes.
stir stuff up.
You know, there's something to
I
that.
don't know about the Marine Corps or the Army, but Navy chiefs come around and they just are bored.
Yeah.
There might be something to that. I'm not speaking to the Navy part, but to the boredom part. I've seen that it's turned out very poorly when people had too much time, managers had too much time on their hands to think about how they were going to reorder things in their own image.
We're on the boat though. It's like 16, 18-hour days, so there's a lot of time to fill it. A lot of micromanaging to do.
Okay.
There's a lot of
So I've had both ends of the spectrum where like micromanaging and then like the complete pushover that just pleases everyone and everyone does whatever they want. So you can, it's like.
Yeah, you can jump off this side of the cliff or that side of the cliff, but it doesn't work out well either way. Right. Okay.
Happy medium.
I would say I had, like, with the manager experience I have, she'll be the type of manager who will say, like, what am I gonna do today? And then what she think of doing that day, she asks you to do it.
Okay. Wow. Oh, there you go.
So you're supposed to be figuring out what you're supposed to do, not what I'm
And that is why the boss is not as stressed as you are.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. There you go. So you were gonna say?
Similar to that, somebody who is a micromanager but super disorganized. So they just give you a bunch of projects and then remember they have something else to do, so you're working on all of these things for them because they think of it, don't actually do it, and then remember there's something else, you have to drop everything you're doing and go fix that one and put that fire out. So you're just running around trying to follow every whim that they have.
Yeah. So Drucker talks about a good organization is boring. Right? A healthy organization is not putting out every fire everywhere, lots of anxiety all over, but it's boring. They're thinking into the future and acting on their plans rather than, oh, I gotta go do this. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when she was speaking of, we call that, the good idea fairy. There's some almond ideas over the cubicle wall with no real direction, just throwing stuff out there for you to do, and it's just going nowhere. So you're just running on a treadmill, and you're running on a different treadmill each day. Whatever gets lobbed over the cube wall at you.
And then you do all this work and you're like, why did I do
Yeah,
all
like
this?
that.
What was the point of this?
But what the sailor they were speaking of, when I was at Parrish Island, we trained a predominant number of our recruits all through the summer. Very, very busy time. As long as you're completing what the training schedule says, no one is really worried about a lot of things. In the winter, it's very slow. Everything is just critiqued to the nth degree because people don't have jobs, they don't have anything to do, so now they're just.
So does the Marine Corps just use summer as extra punishment for?
No, it's just, it's about recruiting. I mean, in reality is, we have to take Marines to Parris Island when Marines are willing to go to Parris Island. And they're willing to go as soon as they graduate high school because they're excited.
Gotcha.
That's when they go. Almost half go down in a very small period of time. And it seems like, why don't you just spread them out, but you gotta get them there when they'll go.
Yeah, sure. Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else? Bad boss?
Mine was a lot like what Rylan was explaining, but there was just so much emotion with her. Like everything was like an emotional reaction. And so it would be, a task would be given and then something like emotionally would happen with that person or with that whatever it was. So that was super difficult for me. Just really unstable, I guess, is kind of
You're like walking on
the
eggshells.
Yeah,
Everything is terrible, but you can't say that.
Yeah.
So, and even if that person's not doing anything, just you having to walk on eggshells is increasing your stress and your cortisol and everything else, right? So, do you understand that section a little bit better with that? Okay. Now, she was talking about the just world hypothesis because we want to say, what? Wait a minute. If the world was fair, and I want to believe that it is, then merit would show the person that merits the best would always win, and other things along those lines. But it doesn't always work that way, right? Okay. So, what is the just world hypothesis? Go ahead.
The belief that the world is fair and
Okay.
good and innately good.
Okay. And is it true? Unfortunately, no, it's not. But, I'm waiting for you. You can fill this in. But,
There are people that have integrity or willing to do this.
yeah, spite of that it's not true, you still are responsible to your maker to do right by other people, to not cheat, right? Okay? Other people might stab others in the back and climb the ladder, but that doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing, and, right? And you know who those people are. It's not like they're getting away with it completely because,
They leave traces.
yeah, they leave traces, right? So in spite of that, you still have to deal with the world as it is and do right by it, and, right? What else? Anything else you want to say about just world hypothesis? Go ahead.
To me, that, I always struggle with that because wrong is wrong, and my wife reminds me after 31 years that I need to choose my battles, and I tell her I do, I choose all of them. Wrong is wrong.
That's awesome.
It's just how I think. I just think that doing the right thing is doing the right thing, and we should all do it that way. And I really have a rub when people don't. And I just can't get over it. I can't accept that hypothesis. I just can't.
Well, I think some people, it's not, I don't think that they intently want to do the wrong thing. I think they do what's convenient for them at the time,
Sure.
or in the situation. So,
Yeah.
but that all, you have enough people doing that.
That becomes a problem. That's right.
We're all human. We all make, I mean, nothing that bad, but, you know, we all want to curse people out in front of you. You know, like, does that make it right?
No.
I live with the idea that I have to lay my head down at night with me, and I'm gonna be able to do that with the clear.
Yeah, with clear conscience, sure.
So that's kind of, I kind of think.
As well you should.
And like you said, I make mistakes throughout the day, but at the end of the day, I want to clear all that up and lay my head down with a clear conscience, regardless of how bad I've screwed it up and, you know, maybe been a bad person.
Now, Pfeffer's like Machiavelli-like. He's just saying, here's how to grasp power, here's how to grasp the ring, and he's not kind to the leadership literature either. Here he's talking about, it's talking about following the inner compass, or being truthful, or being modest and self-effacing, or not behaving in a bullying or abusive way. But that's what people say after they've gotten power, and then they say, oh, that's how it was. There's a certain percentage that's like that, but then there's also people that are the real deal, and you know the real deal when you see the real deal, right? And what I've been teaching in all my classes is exactly the opposite of what he's defaming here, and that is, no, do this the real deal. Because like you just said, you want to have that clear conscience when you lay your head on a pillow. I have a question somewhere here. What's the question?
I was going to respond to the question, but I think for those leaders, for sometimes that we look into the leadership, and whether they be wealthy or just the top leaders, we have a feeling that somehow they got it wrongly, or they did something unjust to get it. And I think it's a refreshing time when you get to meet someone and you know they did it the right way, and they are wealthy, they are at the top of their game. You're like, man, that's pretty cool to see.
Yeah, somebody that you want to emulate as opposed to somebody you're like,
exactly. And you're like, wow, that's how you get it done.
Right.
But I think our mind, or most of our mind, goes to the people who are wealthy at the top leadership positions, that somehow they did something crooked, or maybe less than, with less than great integrity.
Sure. Wait, what's the question here?
Is it true?
Is it true
Is it true that these are flawed?
that this is not the right path?
Right.
It takes me back to the Stevie Rollins that we listened to in 6 or 7. Who was that? Jim Rollins?
No, the servant leadership training seminar.
What was his name?
Hunter.
Yeah. When he talked about the difference between power and authority. And someone like, I'm sorry, I keep using Hitler, but Hitler had power, and Mother Teresa had authority.
That's right.
And that's just my first, in a lot of, not just this question, but a lot of the questions that we've had, I keep going back to that, like, we're in a class called power and influence, but really, do we need to, a lot of the times, take it back to what is actually authority, rather than power, because so often power has that negative connotation. It doesn't have to, but sometimes authority can help us reframe it.
Okay.
And a lot of these things will help you gain authority.
Okay. Anybody else? So essentially what I'm asking you, is Pfeffer right or am I? Because I've been teaching you this path.
I would say you are right. For our frame
which is
of
probably a good
reference.
thing in my class, but yeah.
For our frame of reference.
For our frame of reference.
We're all
Right,
Christians, we're all seeking.
that's right, and so we have to walk a different path. Okay, go ahead.
But I would even argue that people who might not have the language or the faith would still say this is actually the most powerful type of leader, you know? So for
I
us,
think they would believe that it could happen
There are probably a good section that would not believe it, but still would agree with
would
you.
agree.
That,
Like,
that
if
it,
they had
wow, that's something.
If they had an experience with someone who embodied these traits, they would say this is true leadership, this is true power, or whatever.
So if you're walking, I'll get to you in a second, but if you're walking this and you're different, and somebody's asking you, well, why are you different? It should be flowing from your Christian faith of why you're doing these things, and that you should be that model and something that they're seeing, right? Go ahead.
I was going to say, kind of to piggyback off of Anna.
Yes.
Anna. I think while power can indeed have a negative connotation, so can, contrastingly, these here have a more moral, ethical, positive spin where, you know, being truthful can hurt. And these things can, I mean, because there's a particular level of honesty and an inner compass that says, I much like a Marine brother here said, you know, that I cannot go against the grain of who I am as a leader, as you teach. So letting my inner feelings show, being modest and self-effacing, not behaving in a bullying or abusive way, doesn't negate the idea that I'm going to be direct, just like my Christ. Doesn't take away from the idea that if a Samaritan woman's at a well, I'm going to say, no, that's not who you are. I know who you are, and I know what you're going through, and because of that, this may hurt a little bit when I say this, but I'm going to walk with you in this. And so people have to, I guess, being careful of the idea that this is so, super friendly, soft, that as a leader, I have a responsibility to make sure that my particular inner compass is very direct with the idea that these things are wrong. I have to, while I build you, I may have criticized. Much like in the Army or the Marines or Air Force, military, they beat you down for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, because it's a process to build you back up to a particular place. If I'm just abusing my power and authority, then a bad boss is condescending and without the idea of necessarily building you. So, yeah.
Brandon, I saw your hand first, and then
I was going to say, one of the things we were talking about is the truth telling. That was, anyone took that survey already, I thought we were supposed to take it before we came on. But that was one of the questions they have about how much do you value the truth and telling the truth and not lying. That was a whole section of that video was talking about, and so we had to do a self-evaluation, and obviously that's one of those things where I'm just like, ding, over to the 10, which my heart's on my sleeve. I'm just trying to be an honest guy and make 1,000 mistakes along the way. Okay.
I think what I took away from everything he was sharing is the idea that what he said in his book is that basically these things are weak.
yes.
They're not.
But they don't need to be weak. They can be very firm, very strong, you have to, it'll hurt to tell the truth that builds somebody up sometimes, right? I mean, you could lose a relationship with doing the right thing, right?
I think that we read something about it last semester, but I remember talking about how you can have this kind of leadership or the other kind, and both of them can either be weak or strong.
Okay.
The type of it does not define its weakness or its strength. The heart of the person defines its weakness or strength.
And that's right, your motivation very often is the key to doing, you can do the same thing. I don't know what you were talking about that you read, but in class I was talking about how, look, if you know that I'm in your corner, you can take criticism. I just filleted you, but you know that I'm trying to build you up. You know that I'm in your corner, right? That's different than if you don't know me and I do the exact same thing and you think, what a jerk, why did you do that, right? It's different. Okay. Leadership books teach things like those things that we were just talking about. But it says, as a guide for obtaining power, they're flawed, and for most leaders, the path to power bears little resemblance, and yeah, because if he's looking for how can you, as a, with whatever mercenary mind, just grab the gold, the brass ring, whatever, it's gonna be different. Chapter 1, now we finally made it to chapter 1. Yay, go us. Okay. Takes more than performance. As long as, how do you like this? As long as you keep your boss or bosses happy, performance really doesn't matter. Now, he's looked at research about this, and he's not just making stuff up and saying, I mean, he's looked at the research of in business with these kind of things, and there's something to that. What was the question?
It's just that statement.
It's just a statement and your reaction?
Yeah. This made me think of the trust that we read about, Dr. Gay.
Okay.
The effective trust.
Okay.
It's more, I don't know, I kind of actually see this kind of take place in at least in my current work, and to some degree, but there's such a deep relationship and deep trust between us that maybe, I don't know, I just feel like you kind of can't separate the two. Like, effective trust often looks past performance.
Okay, so you should be confident and have a good relationship, right? I mean, that's ideal. But if you're incompetent and have a good relationship and you're still promoted, then something seems like it's wrong here.
Well, I think it could, might be taken in a different way, but I think it could be an unconscious bias. So your leader doesn't know that, they don't know that they just like you, so they think you're doing well because they like you and how you make them feel, right?
Okay, that's very fair.
The first one it made me think of, because along with this sentence, he also was talking about making people empowered, like you, making them happy, not just your bosses, but just people who have power in general. And the first thing I thought of was that's not what Jesus did.
No, it's not.
Whatever.
It's very much not.
He actually did the opposite.
That's right.
Pissed him off. But, so that, obviously, there was context for that, why Jesus did what he did and why the people with the religious power were actually the people that he called out and things like that. But I just thought it was something to think about.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kia.
This just made me think about, it wasn't really my experience, but I was there to witness it. But one of my coworkers, her performance is like through the roof. Like everything about her is just A1 at the job, and like she's a perfect worker. But when it comes like to the boss, if the boss does something wrong, she's very like blunt about feedback. Like she pretty much tells the boss how it is. She'll tell the boss when she's wrong.
Right.
And the boss doesn't like that. So, it's at times when the boss will try to find things that she does wrong in her performance, to make it like, okay, I gotta get her out of here.
Anybody ever saw something like this? Because I've seen this before. I've seen someone that was fired because they were competent as a day is long, but couldn't get along with the boss.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
That happens. Okay?
Friction's going away.
I'm sorry?
Friction will go away.
Yeah, there it goes. It doesn't matter what that cost was, because, they were competent as all get out, but, okay? So, again, we talk about leadership is always relationship, so your relationship with that boss is kind of important, right? It turns out bosses are people too. And they don't like to be aggravated unnecessarily. Now, you don't need to, it doesn't have to be bad, but, part of doing excellent work is also having manners and being polite, and there's that part of it too. Go ahead.
Throughout most of my career, I was an air traffic controller, and my son-in-law is now an air traffic controller. And through that, whether it be working at radar or working in the tower, when you're trained, you're going to train for a year, 2 years at every base you go to. You're plugged in, talking to airplanes, and a monitor is plugged in with you. And it is such a judgment call. And one of the things I told my son-in-law when he was getting to the field is, and we terminate people out of that job all the time because they can't do it. And I would say that never did I see someone who was really liked and really a team player get terminated. But I saw a lot of young males and females get terminated out of the field because they were just, and I thought more it was because people just weren't willing to go the extra mile to get the training they needed because they were just.
Wait, what was that other half of the sentence? Never ever seen somebody who was a team player get terminated, but you saw what get terminated?
The people who were problem children, if you will.
Yeah.
Friction points, just
Yeah.
come get along.
That makes sense.
Just whatever, you're working in a very close environment.
Yeah.
You know, 8 different sizes of this room, and if you had a personality that didn't get along with the team, you better be a very, very, very good air traffic controller if you were going to survive, or you were just going to get terminated.
Yeah.
Just
By the way, I didn't know that's what you did. Remember conductor on the spectrum, air traffic controllers on the other end of the spectrum.
Yes.
It's almost got the air anchor point.
yes, that's what I did. That was my original job for years.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the highest stress jobs that you can have. Okay, go ahead.
So this really struck me. So 2 more points on this. So I almost would go past the happy thing, like it goes back to not just like being a boss happy, but being in a relationship.
Okay, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Unpack, yeah, unpack
So
that.
even today, and I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but today I had to have a pretty what was kind of a hard conversation. Like I was nervous to have the conversation because it was something that was directly tied to what would be under my performance. But my two bosses, right? So like the executive director organization was in there, and my direct report boss was in there, and I was basically going against something that I really feel strongly not to open that door. Does that make sense? Like there's just this opportunity that we open the door to. I don't think it's a good door to walk through.
Yeah.
And I had to have that conversation, and I kept sharing I don't want this to sound like I'm not a team player. I don't want this to sound like I'm not for us or fighting for our organization. But they just kept affirming me and saying no, we trust you. We trust you've proven over the last 3 years that we can trust that you are a team player. That we can trust that you are. So
That's right. And wounds from a friend can be trusted.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a different thing because you're talking about relationships. So I put myself in the same kind of scenario a couple of years back, working for the dean that I was when I was the graduate program director. I had to have some hard conversations, but in the same way, he trusted me. We had that relationship. It wasn't keeping him happy necessarily in the moment, but it was keeping him happy in the sense that he knew I had his back. I mean, happy in the real long-term sense, not happy in that moment sense. Now, there's a relationship and there's maturity on both ends. But what if your boss is just not that kind of a boss and he just wants you to do his bidding? And, that kind of bad boss we were talking about before, he doesn't want to be unhappy. He wants to just have you do, didn't I tell you to do that thing? Right? Now you're in a different place, but again, the relationship isn't what relationship is. It's a one-way, downward-only kind of relationship. You don't actually have a relationship. So it's good that you unpack the difference between being happy and actually, right? Okay? Because I think when we're talking about the being happy, we're talking about that other scenario, and in that case, that might very well be true. Sure. And then we call you a yes man. Right? Isn't that how that works? Okay. She's not really a yes man. I'm just okay. Job accomplishments do not guarantee power. Okay. You must create a path to power, says Pfeffer. Yay. Okay. What do you think of that? There's another thing here.
It says that exact thing.
Okay. It says the quote. I should probably have that out in front of me, but okay. So you should create. So what do you think? You must create a path to power.
Will naturally be created if you walk in integrity.
Is it because of your just world hypothesis?
That's a good question.
Yeah. So I would like to think that there's a pure meritocracy in the world, but I don't believe that that's true. I think there's a lot to a meritocracy if you're doing the right thing. Right? Go ahead.
In the Navy, to get paper money, pick up a rank, you have to hit wickets or little ladder rungs or whatever.
Okay.
So this makes sense to me to plan for success.
Okay.
So.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing to plan of the things that you want to do in order to move.
I would plan on 3, 5, 10, 15 year plans on different things for different reasons.
Okay. Okay. It's not necessarily bad, but it also doesn't necessarily give us warm fuzzies.
And I think a lot of people think like that, and for the Marine Corps, they're going to move you every 3 years, and a lot of those assignments you're not going to be ready for them, and you're not going to willingly go, but you're just going to do it. And their big mantra really was, grow where planted. Grow where planted.
Okay.
And if you grow where planted, everything, you're going to work your way up, and you're going to get the rewards at the end of the day. And whether you get sent to recruiting duty in Iowa or recruiting duty in San Diego, grow where planted, and everything's going to work out for you.
Okay.
I don't know that was always the truth, but that was the lie we were selling anyway.
Okay.
My argument was that it made me think of Joshua and whether or not he created his path to power with the
It's interesting.
Because he went in with the team of spies, and he and one other person came back and said, yes, we can go in, and everyone else doubted. Like, he showed that he was faithful, and he showed that he was willing to be a leader.
Yeah, so good.
But ultimately, God ordained him with the power.
Okay, excellent. Now, when you didn't, are you an actress?
Yeah.
Did you notice that, or did you have my slides ahead of time?
No.
No, you didn't. Okay, you're not supposed to say yes for that, but I asked the wrong person. Are you an
I
actress?
really do
You actually
theater,
are
so.
an actress. Okay, no, you're not a plant.
No.
Right, okay, good. Okay, what's the scripture say? No one from the east or the west or from the desert can exalt themselves. It is God who judges. He brings one down, he exalts another. Right? Do we believe that or no? Do we feel like we have to carve our way out into success, or is it that God's going to use me as he uses me, as he prepares me and moves me into his purposes?
I think
It doesn't mean you can't plan. You can plan, but there's a difference between planning and stepping on, this guy. I don't know that I want to be this guy being stepped on, right?
I think in all my responses to this, I've always kind of flinched away from the word power. And then I think in our society, a lot of times we equivalate that with like success. So you must create a path to success, which equals power. Or you must create a path to your dream. And if I replace that, the word power with those words, it sounds better. And so it's like, I'm just planning my career, I'm just doing these things. But when you really look at the heart of it, are you really just seeking power? And that's where...
So that's the hard issue that we have to deal with. Okay, now, we were talking about this verse, and then we were talking about, remember back in 607? Right? We have to hold it loosely. Right? As opposed to trying to hang on to it, because if you're trying to hang on to it with all you're going to do some unethical things, or you're going to take it personally when people insult you. And what do we know from this? From what the juice was? That's right. It looks alluring, doesn't it? We think in terms of this guy. We think in terms of this guy. I'm going to climb up the ladder over these guys. But what about him? Doesn't he have hopes and dreams and aspirations too? We can't treat other people like objects along that path and think God's going to bless that. Right? Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. Okay. Job outcomes. Behavioral commitment. Supervisors who hired rated subordinate. Supervisors who hired rated subordinates more favorably than subordinates that they inherited. So if I hired her, I rated her more favorably than she who I inherited. Sorry, I'm still thinking back to the verses before that, and my mouth wasn't catching up. Okay, so why is that? This makes complete sense. Well, if I hired her, this is my judgment here. Of course she did well. Right? She's really not up to par, but hey, I chose her. She's a diamond in the rough.
So they're judging themselves.
Yeah, they're judging themselves. That's what's going on here. Okay? Success is not tied to performance. Salaries tend to be tied more to tenure than to performance. That's miserable. Right? Especially if you're knocking yourself out trying to do excellence. But again, why are you knocking yourself out trying to do excellence? Are you doing it to please God, or are you doing it because you're trying to get ahead? If you're doing it to please God, keep knocking yourself out. That's pleasing Him by doing excellent work. But if you're doing it to, get yourself, that's going to be miserable. Excellent performance may make your boss unwilling to let you go. Hey, here's the backfire part. Right? Did that grab anybody? Okay. Yeah, sure. Because you're really good at what you do. Not you. I'm sorry, you're not diamond in the rough. You're really good at what you do. So we're going to make sure that nobody else sees her and snatches her away. Right? Why? Because you're too weak. No, you should be, if she's going, I should be happy for you. You've got to get your heart right to be happy for her when she does go. Right? Go ahead.
My brother was playing a soccer game 2 days ago, and he doesn't play goalie, but they didn't have a goalie, or the goalie wanted to come on the field, or whatever. For whatever reason, my brother was in the goal. And my dad was telling him, don't do your best, because you don't want to play goalie. And if you do your best in the goal, they'll want you to play goalie. And so, of course, my dad was kidding when he said that. He, of course, wants his son to do his best. But he was kind of kidding, like, hey, don't say that one, because, then they'll put you back back in there again, and we've never been like a goalie family, we like to be on the field. So it's that same idea of like, if you actually perform to your highest ability in that setting that you maybe don't want to stay in forever.
Yeah, they're gonna wanna keep you,
Yeah.
you know. Yep. Okay, anybody else? Nope, okay. Performance, poor performance plus power. Executives with poor performance but who had power were more likely to retain their position. Hey, it makes sense. It's not necessarily fair, but it makes sense. People like what they, exposure effect. People like what they remember, and being memorable leads to promotion. Which is why people do far better when they're spending a disproportionate amount of time networking than when they're spending the time doing their actual job. Because now people know them and they remember them and they, right? Right. So they give the example of Tina Brown. Tina Brown was in one disastrous magazine after another, and she just kept getting promoted from one thing to another to another. Why? Because she was out there being memorable. Okay? I mean, and in all of these, she wasn't really a success in any measurable way. Okay? She never earned a profit. Any place that she was. But, oh, how creative we were over here at this magazine and that, and right? And she just kept getting promoted. There are limits to what you can do to affect the criteria used to judge your work, but you can highlight those dimensions of your job performance that favor you and work against your competition. Okay, this saying, tell half the truth is what it's kind of saying. But it's true. I mean, in some regards, it's even a potentially useful thing to highlight certain things that they want. But that doesn't mean take other places off your resume. What I have here, was it just a quote?
See, there is. You have
There
a
was
page
one.
22 and a page 31, and a page 29.
Oh, that might have been one I took out. I removed some of these because I was trying to be kind to you all. Okay, so I'm just saying, because I kind of overdid it the first time through. Yes. Okay, so remember what matters to your boss. Ask for help and advice. Why? What happens when you ask your boss for help?
It makes them feel smart.
Yeah, it creates a relationship. It's flattering to those in power over you. Act on what they tell you, but you know it's flattering to them.
Makes them happy.
What's that?
It makes them happy.
Yeah, it makes them happy. Oh, well, I'll tell you what I did when I was in your position. Let me tell you about when I was your age. Right? Yeah, I mean, it's just human nature. Now, that's not necessarily doing this for that reason is not necessarily a good thing, but in doing that, this is the result. Build a power base. The surest way to keep your position and build a power base is to help those with more power enhance their positive feelings about themselves. Okay, who else is cringing? You should be cringing here. Okay, what do you have to say with this?
It was what we just said.
Which is?
Go to them and ask them to make them feel better about themselves.
Okay.
Go ask your manager something so they can tell you, back in the day when I had your job, this is how I did.
Okay, what else?
It goes against servant leadership. I mean, who are you serving?
Okay.
Your purpose.
There you are. People overestimate their abilities, and yeah. And so let's park on that for a second. Is this? I find nowhere in Scripture where it says anything like this, right? Go out into the world and build your power by sucking up to those who have power, so that you can get ahead and step on others. It's not. I mean, it's almost the inversion.
But I think it's the reality.
But it is the reality of people that are trying to get ahead. So understanding what they have done very often. This is why you say that you look at these people and you're like kind of cringing a little bit, like what did they do? Well, some of them were using that path. People overestimate their abilities. This is the above average effect. People overestimate their own abilities and accomplishments in intelligence, humor, driving ability, appearance, negotiating ability. Who among you rate yourself in any of these as the lower half?
I'm not funny.
You're not funny? Everybody's laughing. There you are. We put that aside.
No, my
Right?
mom always tells me I'm not funny. I mean it.
We try to think that we're reasonable. Remember the rider on the elephant? We're really not. We really assume much more of ourselves. When you turn in the paper to me, I am far more objective than you are. You think because you spent hours on that paper that this is the greatest stuff ever, right? And you're tricking yourself. It's really not. Okay, now, it doesn't have to be not, but sometimes it's really not, right? I'm more objective than you are. But if you're turning in the paper, she's more objective about your paper than you are, right? Because you think that it's because you did it. Does that make sense? So you have to be careful with these things. So, like Wobegon, right, where the women are strong and all the men are good looking and all the children above average, right? So there's some research in the U.S. News and World Report survey. They asked, what's the likelihood of certain people going to heaven? Mother Teresa, 79%. Oprah got 66%. I don't know how they did that. Princess Diana got 60%. O.J. Simpson got 19%. Not looking good for O.J. But they also asked, what about you? Yourself, 87%. Mother Teresa is 8% down from you. Isn't that incredible? That's the effect. You understand? No more needs to be said about that. Okay. Make others feel good about themselves. Again, you have in-groups and out-groups. So we have, like in LMX, in-group and out-group bias. Right? We like people that we like, that we already know, that we're comfortable with or familiar with. And the out-group, they're the others. Oh my. But the people in the out-group are also doing the same thing. I don't know. What about them? Same thing. Use of flattery. It works. Does flattery work? Okay? It engages the norm of reciprocity. Like you feel like you got. Have you ever had that? When you were little, you stumble over like, hey, I just said I'm sorry, and they said, I'm sorry too. And you're like, okay. Now my kids will be like, I'm sorry. And the other will walk away and really, no, say you're sorry, right? Like you have to say you're sorry back, right? The norm, this is a strong norm, the norm of reciprocity. We'll actually get into that in Cialdini significantly. Like he's got a chapter on reciprocity. So flattery, it works. What do you want to say about this with the journal, with the question?
Use it when it's true.
Use it when it's true. Very good. Very good.
I just thought of our call as Christians to honor one another, so it's almost like an exchange of honor versus flattery.
Yeah, and again, that's very different than flattery, which is doing that to try to get something or try to improve your own position or image or whatever else, right? Scripture, again, everyone lies to their neighbor, they flatter with their lips, but harbor deception in their hearts. May the Lord silence all flattering lips and every boastful tongue. That's not what Pfeffer's telling you, right? Those who flatter their neighbors are spreading nets for their feet. But what did we just say about earlier? Wounds from a friend can be trusted. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, right? The people responsible for your success are those above you with the power to either promote you or to block you as you rise up the chart. That's true, but that doesn't mean flatter them in order to get ahead or suck up or whatever. And besides, as a leader, your job is to actually look downline and take care of them. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't take care of your leader. You do. You take care of that person as well. I mean, that's part of leading, right? But the people in your care are the ones that you really should be paying that attention to and being that shelter for, right? Chapter 2, you made it. Okay, no, we got to get through chapter 3 tonight, right?
Yes.
Okay, chapter 2. Okay, qualities that lead to power. You can develop the qualities necessary that produce power. So would you hire this guy? From everything you see here, and you don't know very much of him. What'd you see? What's your first impression?
I like confidence in the individual.
Looks like he's got it together, confident, dresses for success. Okay? And that's kind of the superficial thing that he's looking at. I would hire him because he was one of my former students, so I like him. But you don't know anything about him, but this is like the image rather than the thing. Right? The number one predictor of electability is what? Likability. Which is amazing when you think about our politicians, isn't it? No, I'm not kidding. I mean, it's amazing. Especially in the last election when you had like, well,
Less of two evils is really into.
but both sides were saying less of two evils. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Marshall Goldsmith talks about feed-forward control. It's a coaching technique. You focus on what you need for the next step of your career, and I have no idea why that's there. Why is that there? It was in the book, but I'm trying to remember what I was linking that to. Okay, well, we're going to skip it. Okay, do an objective self-assessment. Oh, that's why, because we're talking about self-assessing, because in the book, he was talking about these things. Okay, so you don't know what you don't know. This is the Kruger and Dunning effect, right? Did that grab anybody's attention? right? That was fun. When you got to that, Kruger and Dunning found that people who lack knowledge don't even know that they're deficient. For example, they scored 12% percentile in grammar and logic, but they thought they were in the 62nd percentile on average when they guessed where they were. I had somebody apply to our graduate program. I can say this now because I'm a long way from when I was in that job. Apply to our graduate program, was scored in the 8th percent in the GMAT. Right? Now, we don't require a GMAT unless we're like a little skeptical. So, you know, like, okay, let's see if this is the thing that will make sure that you're going to work. Because if we let you in the program, we're pretty confident that you can get through. Because we think it's unethical to like take your money knowing that they're going to fail. Right? They were at 8% in the GMAT, and they thought that that meant that they were 92% above. I mean, they were above everybody except 8%. That's the effect. That's what we're talking about. They did not know that. They did not understand that. Okay? That's what's going on here. Dunning-Kruger effect. Here's an explanation of it.
Does being on video freak you out? I get.
That's a commercial. That's not the same thing.
Are you as good at things as you think you are?
Nope.
How good are you at managing money? What about reading people's emotions? How healthy are you compared to other people you know? Are you better than average at grammar? Knowing how competent we are and how our skills stack up against other people's is more than a self-esteem boost. It helps us figure out when we can forge ahead on our own decisions and instincts, and when we need instead to seek out advice. But psychological research suggests that we're not very good at evaluating ourselves accurately. In fact, we frequently overestimate our own abilities. Researchers have a name for this phenomenon, the Dunning-Kruger Effect. This effect explains why more than 100 studies have shown that people display illusory superiority. We judge ourselves as better than others to a degree that violates the laws of math. When software engineers at 2 companies were asked to rate their performance, 32% of the engineers at one company and 42% at the other put themselves in the top 5%. In
Not a lot of
another
room in that top 5.
88% of American drivers describe themselves as having above average driving skills. These aren't isolated findings. On average, people tend to rate themselves better than most in disciplines ranging from health, leadership skills, ethics, and beyond. What's particularly interesting is that those with the least ability are often the most likely to overrate their skills to the greatest extent. People are measurably poor at logical reasoning, grammar, financial knowledge, math, emotional intelligence, running medical lab tests, and chess all tend to rate their expertise almost as favorably as actual experts do. So who's most vulnerable to this delusion? Sadly, all of us, because we all have pockets of incompetence we don't recognize. But why? When psychologists Dunning and Kruger first described the effect in 1999, they argued that people lacking knowledge and skill in particular areas suffer a double curse. First, they make mistakes and reach poor decisions. But second, those same knowledge gaps also prevent them from catching their errors. In other words, poor performers lack the very expertise needed to recognize how badly they're doing. For example, when the researchers studied participants in a college debate tournament, the bottom 25% of teams in preliminary rounds lost nearly 4 out of every 5 matches. But they thought they were winning almost 60%. Without a strong grasp of the rules of debate, the students simply couldn't recognize when or how often their arguments broke down. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't a question of ego blinding us to our weaknesses. People usually do admit their deficits once they can spot them. In one study, students who had initially done badly on a logic quiz and then took a mini course on logic were quite willing to label their original performances as awful. That may be why people with a moderate amount of experience or expertise often have less confidence in their abilities. They know enough to know that there's a lot they don't know. Meanwhile, experts tend to be aware of just how knowledgeable they are, but they often make a different mistake. They assume that everyone else is knowledgeable too. The result is that people, whether they're inept or highly skilled, are often caught in a bubble of inaccurate self-perception. When they're unskilled, they can't see their own faults. When they're exceptionally competent, they don't perceive how unusual their abilities are. So if the Dunning-Kruger effect is invisible to those experiencing it, what can you do to find out how good you actually are at various things? First, ask for feedback from other people, and consider it, even if it's hard to hear. Second, and more important, keep learning. The more knowledgeable we become, the less likely we are to have invisible holes in our competence. Perhaps it all boils down to that old proverb: when arguing with a fool, first make sure the other person isn't doing the same thing. Did you enjoy this lesson? If so, please consider supporting our nonprofit mission by visiting patreon.com.
Okay, what do you think? Have you seen that now? There's the other side of the scale too, where if you're so expert, I mean, I'd imagine at air traffic controlling, you're fairly expert. You might not know how expert you are or how you're not, so this teachers.
Everybody's the best.
Teachers have this problem too sometimes because they're used to thinking through stuff their way, not realizing how long it was from where they once were and that they're not communicating well, right? So there can be two sides of it. Okay, anything else about that before we go? No? Okay, 7 important personal qualities. Again, he's saying you can create these qualities in you so that you can seize power. Will and skill. Okay, will is ambition, energy, focus, and then skills are things: self-knowledge, reflective mind, self-confidence, ability to project self-assurance, ability to read others and empathize with their point of view and tolerate conflict. I have a thing there. What was the question?
Which are good or bad?
What's good, what's bad?
I think you can use them both in both ways.
Okay, that's good. That's a good answer. Anybody want to say anything is particularly bad itself? Or particularly good itself?
I think they, like she said, they can go both ways. Like, for example, a capacity to tolerate conflict, that could mean you're super confrontational, so you're just always ready for a fight.
Mm-hmm.
That's not good. But if sometimes you need to be stern and
Brad's right there.
So
Okay.
both ways.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it can work both ways. Ambition, desire to achieve, for achievement or success could be good or bad, and this is one that's more prone to being bad, especially in this particular context, right? If your ambition isn't reined in, Brad was talking about earlier about having checks or whatever. If you're like, I've never seen a good leader, somebody who I think is a good leader, who I really believe is a really good leader, who tries to repulse checks and people that will speak into their lives. That's always a danger sign. Every time I've ever seen that, it was a red flag.
What did you say?
If a leader who does not want any accountability in their
Oh,
lives,
check, is that what you said?
yeah, some kind of check on their lives or somebody who will speak into them,
Accountability.
always bad. Never, ever have I seen that to be a good thing. Okay? Energy. Well, okay, so you need energy in order to, get things done. Okay? Eeyore's probably not getting much done. Okay? So energy is probably a good thing. Focus. Now, specialization, concentration, and leverage. The more you can focus on that, whatever your priority is, and if you have 37 priorities, you don't have one. Right? It's got to be a priority, maybe 2, with major one, something like that. Otherwise, you don't have it. You have to be able to focus. Go ahead.
I just wanted to very quickly comment on energy.
Yeah.
Because my takeaway is I wrote energy is good. Just very simply, it's good to have energy. It's not good to not have energy.
Okay.
We need that to throughout our lives. But sometimes I've noticed, I can do this, I'm sure many people can agree, that if we feel so energized in ourselves, we forget to rest in God.
Okay.
And
Very
it's
good.
hard to rest. It makes it difficult to rest, and He actually calls us to rest as much as He calls us to live.
Yep.
So that was my only critique of energy, is
Good.
that we need to be able to rise.
Good, that's a fine addition to what we're talking about. Go ahead.
I highlighted one thing under focus, that struck out to me, that this focus turns out to be surprisingly rare.
Yeah, it is surprisingly rare. How many people do you know that are really focused like they should be?
I thought everyone except me.
Huh?
I thought it was everyone except me.
That is or is not focused?
That was focused. I thought everyone was focused except me.
No, we're all like you. Most people are far more diffused than they ought to be in order to be really successful.
Which relates back to rest.
Which part of that does relate back to rest. That's very good.
I was gonna say negative energy that I've noticed working with people, because I tend to be a very laid back person when I resolve problems. I want to think about it more. And then I've worked with many people who are just like, they jump on the first answer very quickly, and they just want an answer. They want to move forward. They have a lot of energy in how they approach things, and so we clash sometimes. And I've seen like that's not always the best way to go. So the opposite of focus could be energy in some ways.
Okay. That it? Okay. Concentrate on those activities within your particular job or position that are the most critical, that have the most impact on getting work done and on others' perceptions of you and your effectiveness. That's focus. What's the matter? Somebody's laughing.
No, it's when you, like, others' perceptions of you and your effectiveness.
Okay. And what about that grab you?
Well,
This is Pepper talking.
Yeah, I know, yeah, that's what I'm not.
I'm less looking than that than actually doing the focus part, right? But he's talking about get these others' perceptions of you to be, wow, he's hyper-focused. Remember, the perceptions, Seinfeld had George Costanza just sitting in the office, not actually doing anything, but looking angry, throwing papers around and stuff. That's the others' perception of you. But that's not what I was after. But it's interesting that you flagged that.
Yeah.
It seems like most of these quotes, they're great for about 3/4 of the way.
It's a good observation.
Stop right there, getting work done, and just put a period there. He's awesome.
Yeah.
And it just keeps.
It's a good observation. He's talking about, though, the 80-20 kind of idea, right? Most 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. Focus on that, okay? But he's also talking about it in a different, skewed kind of way. Self-knowledge. There's no learning and personal development without reflection. Yes, you must reflect. This is why you see this journal kind of thing that I require you to do in most of my classes, right? Because this is going to help you reflect, and it's going to let it seep down into you. Okay? Studied reflection takes time. It also requires discipline to concentrate, make notes, and think about what you're doing. But it's very useful in building a path to power. I should have stopped here again. Okay. Confidence. Confidence is associated with power. You don't see a lot of powerful people that are like, oh, I don't know, should I say something? Shouldn't I? Right? You don't see that.
To say something.
Yeah, it's often the person that is an extrovert that's willing to just say something. And it might be Dunning-Kruger where they shouldn't have said something, but usually that person gets dubbed as a leader, right?
That takes me back to Joshua again, because you have to ask the question, who are you confident in?
Sure.
Are you confident in yourself, or are you confident in Christ through you? Because that makes a big difference, because confidence in yourself almost always leads to arrogance, but it's actually okay to be arrogant about Christ.
That's right. It's okay to have that full confidence. Again, that's right. That's why even the good leadership books stop short when they just say, look inside, right? Absolutely. Confidence is associated with power. Empathy helps you advance your agenda. And he talked about Lyndon Johnson. One of his sources of success was that he was assiduous attention to details for his 99 colleagues in the Senate. Knowing which ones wanted a private office, who were the drunks, who were the womanizers, okay, this is called manipulation. That's what that is. But, it worked in the Pfefferian sense. Did I say that? Pfefferian sense? In Pfeffer's way, that worked. It got him and brought him to power. Okay? And if you want to read about that, that's what you want to read, Cairo's books on Johnson. 7 important personal qualities. Again, capacity to tolerate conflict. Workplace bullying is persistent. It's effective for the bully, but not necessarily for others, right? Because people are conflict averse. They don't actually want to, intervene or be part of it. Just don't do it around bread. Okay? You know why? No, right? Okay. Intelligence. The single best predictor of job performance is intelligence. It's 90% of the variation, but so you're going to be good at your job if you're smart. All other things being equal, hire a smart person. right? That's what it tells us. But its link to power is different, and that's weak. Just because you're smart doesn't mean you're going to climb the ladder. What's going to make you climb the ladder? Networking, that kind of thing is going to climb the ladder, not the intelligence. Intelligent people often fail because they think they're smart. Somebody was talking about this too. I think it was Tyrone earlier, talking about the person that knows it A to Z, right? But then doesn't listen to you. Why? Because a really intelligent person doesn't rely on others, don't feel that they need to listen to them, don't think they matter, and tries to do it themselves, and then it falls apart. So there's something to the humility of caring about other people enough to listen to what they have to say. I found when I was in a managerial kind of role that I would bring things to subordinates. Okay. Now I at least had an MBA and at some points a PhD in these roles. But when I brought it to subordinates who had far less education, they always improved it. It's amazing. They always improve. And I figured out very early, hey, you're not so smart that you need to not do this. Go back to that well. Let them improve it every time. If I was arrogant, maybe in some ways, other ways maybe I am, but in that way I'm not arrogant, right? Please tell me what you think, and they improve it. And guess what? It looks better. Yay, go us. But you got to be at least humble enough to recognize that. Intelligent people sometimes rely on themselves instead of being willing to hear from others. Okay, so this is what you were talking about before, taking the assessment. Okay, and so here, this is one of the questions. So as you rate yourself, you'll hopefully get some insight. You'll get even more when you do the power assessment later on. This is the power source of self-assessment. There are 11 types of power, and it will ask you about a number of questions about knowledge power, and about history power, and about character power, and other things. Okay, and I gave you the example of history power. If you're in an organization for a long time, you know where all the players are, you know how things work around there, you know you have a reputation. Those kind of things are the things that are going to increase that. Okay, so do you have any questions about what you're going to be doing with that handout?
We just do it on the handout?
Yeah, you just do it on the handout, scan it. What I'd like you to do is, was this me? I should work on this, I should work on that. So because you're going to have to give a little assessment for yourself in that first one, like, paragraph or two, something like that. And then people in your group are going to look at what was high, what was low. It would be helpful if you would say this in the assessment. If you'd say something like, I found that I'm really high on knowledge power, history power, and role power. My lowest one was willpower, network power, and character power, or something along those lines, to help guide them. Because, right, your peers are going to be looking at this and then trying to help you with it. Okay? All right.
And actually, it takes you right through that. When you follow along in that thing, it'll basically have adequate points, and then it'll tell you a list of 3 that you were high in and low in.
Yeah.
It'll kind of walk through it.
Right. So just a little summary of what fit and what didn't, so that the rest of your team can help you. Okay. Chapter 3, choosing where to start. And this is the last chapter, and we're almost there. Okay, choosing where to start. So he gave some examples of the University of California. So moving up was reflective of the power of your department. It could be different wherever. Different things will lead to power. So the department, the prestigious department gave the individual in it more power than somebody else who was more powerful in a less prestigious department. Public utility salary growth was tied to the power of the operational unit. That happens sometimes, right? Where they did better just because they were in this unit as opposed to that unit. And then looking to the future, developing a power base. Here he was talking about the whiz kids at some point, right? GM. Okay, so historically, CEOs and executives came from different places that were, for a time, more prestigious in order to draw CEOs from. So you'd want to be in one of those places now. So in the early 20th century, the entrepreneurs and founders very often were the CEOs, and okay, we understand that. But in the 1910s, with industrialization moving a particular way, manufacturing and production was really important. Right? Think about how mechanized things were in the turn of the 20th century. Later, marketing and sales. By the 1960s to 80s, it was finance. Right? When I was doing my MBA, the tech thing still ruled, but it was starting to be displaced by leadership kind of thinking. Right? But you had to be the hard numbers guy in order to be successful later on down the line. Then they realized that they were crashing the the economy. This was not a good way to go. You actually need to get to know people. And so leadership is starting to build in momentum as far as what's important. And so in my MBA in '95, you started to see that moving forward, and now you see that a lot more commonly. Diagnosing departmental power. The person with the most accurate understanding of power distribution often has power, right? Who are the key players? Well, where should I go for this? That's often a very powerful person. Relative pay talks about or shows you who has the most power. Physical location or proximity also shows you the same thing. Positions on committees, who listens to them, that kind of thing. What was my question on this one?
Which one of those is the most important?
Okay, so which one is the most important?
I said the understanding power distribution.
Okay,
That's just a personal opinion.
okay,
I think understanding comes first before application.
okay.
I would say that, and access to me was another one.
Access is big.
Access is huge.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of dovetail, because you have to understand the distribution to know who you need the access to.
Okay.
And then you have to go about trying to position yourself to gain access to those people who have the power.
Yeah,
the
there's-
distribution.
What about, okay, physical location, nobody was talking about positions on committees or,
I put that a second.
Okay.
Being known and noted.
okay, well, you just talked about that. You're my in-group, I see you regularly, I like you, right? So you're in the place where you can actually make the decisions?
And it doesn't always have to be a bad thing, because sometimes what that does, he framed it in a negative light, but sometimes what that means is that you build trust.
Okay,
So in that way, it's good.
You want to have a seat at the table. I mean,
Sure.
If not, we can say it's a negative thing. If you're not getting invited to the meetings, you're not going to be upward and home.
no, that may very well be, yeah, that's right. Okay, so this is just, and I think, now, again, part of what you're doing with the journal is you're highlighting the positive, negative, or neutral. This could be neutral, it depends on how it's used. Or here, we're just trying to understand what's going on, or which of these, or rank this, or whatever. Okay? Physical decor. Have you ever thought about power as spoken through physical decor? Yeah. Okay, so size, and this was in the White House, size and failure could be seen in the size or decor or location of the offices. Anyone who moved to a smaller office was on the way down. If a carpenter, cabinet maker, or wallpaper hanger was busy in someone's office, this was a sure sign that he was on the rise. Right? Isn't that interesting? So this is the White House. This is there's an interesting article here about the power of decor. A reporter going in here. I want to show you this. It's only like 2 minutes. It's from Time, and here's the little video clip. That's a Capital One commercial. Ignore that for a moment. Don't look.
Or watch right away.
Yeah, she's like, very good. That's hey, your sound.
8th, I went to the White House to interview the President of the United States and have dinner with him, along with Time Washington Bureau Chief Michael Shearer and Time Managing Editor Nancy Gibbs. The President was obviously trying to put on a show for us. It was choreographed. There was a whole bunch of stage direction. It started in the Oval Office. He took us behind the scenes into his private study, a room where he does a lot of his work during the day. We then walked into the executive mansion. He rode in the elevator. We thought he was going to go to the first floor. Instead, he took us up to the second floor, the private residence. Secret Service doesn't allow most photographs in these residence levels, and we were essentially not permitted to take photos up there. I've interviewed the President 7, 8, 9 times. I've never seen him like that, and I've never seen the White House like that. And this is a sort of unusual level of access for anyone, reporters included. It speaks to how the President likes to use the powers of pageantry to achieve his aims. They certainly do get people a little bit off guard. And there's an element of you are walking through history, and he likes to try to use that to his advantage.
He's not the only one. Presidents have, for a long time, called congressmen before an important vote. Come to a dinner at the White House, just before a big vote. What I found interesting though, this is the White House, is the Oval Office, but found this article a while back. I remember hearing it in the news. Might not work so well for this particular president. At least 8 people heard Trump call the White House a dump. Well, this is his house in Manhattan. His apartment in Trump Tower, right? So, but again, what's it doing? It's screaming something, right? Look at me, look how rich this is, I'm important, right? That's what he's trying to do with it. Okay, so a trade-off between a strong power base and less competition. This is one of the things that he was talking about with, which way do you want to go? Do you want to go to this way or this strategy? So a powerful department is advantageous, but it could be very competitive. But if you have a niche department that's less competitive, but you could be like the big player in there, right? Okay, what's my question on that? Doesn't matter.
Where were you planning?
Okay, next. Okay, so, hey, we're done. Yay, go us. Final thoughts. Power sources assessment due week 2. MLK's birthday is week 3, so we are not here. Networking action plan is due in week 4. Articles on trust. So I gave you these articles. Everybody have these? So what you're going to do with this is dig into these as starting points to jump off and look up in the references in the back of these articles from whatever you find interesting here that you can, right? You don't have to use these. You can just dig into other research, but this is to help get you started. Okay? This is McKnight and 2 articles by McKnight. Focus on subcomponents of trust and the interplay of integrity, benevolence, and competence. This is going to be where the action is when we're dealing with trust. These 3 subcomponents. Okay? What questions do you have for me? Go ahead.
Your slides from the night to be posted online, specifically this one?
They can be. What I'm actually going to do is I'll post a video. I'll post a video of class. And then you'll have everything that we've talked about. So if you want to hear anything again, because you may not have gotten something, and then you can capture the notes. Okay? Yes?
Whenever we come into class next time, do you actually want us to have the entire article printed or just the...
No, I don't want you to have the article printed. That's a good question. I want you to have had the article, the reference, and a little synopsis or quote or whatever it is that you thought was useful on that thing that you can then talk to. You can talk about the article in whatever meaningful way is meaningful to you. Okay? Yep.
Is each test on a specific book?
Yes. So we'll do almost all of power, and then we'll do influence, and then we'll influencing like Jesus, and then it worked for me, and then the final will pick up a little bit of stuff that wasn't on there as well. Okay?
Is there PowerPoints for those? Like you did quizzes in the 6th?
Quizzes?
Yeah, you have PowerPoints for the quizzes, or each chapter, I mean, for the book for 6th?
No, but I will post the video. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, as I do with most of my classes, what did you learn? Go ahead.
Infinite power, live a healthier life. That's not in power.
Yeah, so those are the top. I mean, there's something there about being in charge, and that's less painful than being the underling. Yeah, go ahead.
Pfeiffer has questionable inner compass.
Yes, not even a questionable inner compass. I'm not sure he has an inner compass. Yeah. He could use one. If anybody gets to know him, go ahead.
Whenever I was answering the journal questions, I put neutral on almost everyone, not all of them, but most of them, because my takeaway was that they can, in light of scripture, and in light of the presence of the Holy Spirit in that person's life, almost all of them can be used.
Yeah, very many of them are useful. Flattery, no, but a lot of them are still useful. But again, it comes back to your motivation, right?
Even with flattery, I made the comment that as Christians, we should want to lift others up, and we should want to...
But that's not flattery. You're stretching that one.
Right. Well, but it was you can reframe. You can reframe his ideas from where his were starting to go towards the...
You're being kinder to him than maybe you should. But
I'm being kinder to the ideas.
Yeah, okay, you're being kind to the ideas. Okay, who's next? Go ahead.
I was going to say your motive matters when or if you are seeking power. Are you seeking it for yourself, or are you seeking it to benefit people?
That's right. Motive is very important. What else?
I think it was just a review
I've been banging this drum for a reason, please listen. Right? It does, it comes back to the heart, and it comes back to the relationship and the people that you're leading. Right? Yep, who else?
I was just gonna say, it actually falls, everything falls back on leadership as a ministry. You know,
Yep.
when you say building relationship, building trust, and the trust can go both ways as well. But at the same time, it's keeping that hand out instead of that tight grip, it's all me. So even while you're trying to gain that power, you're also trying to bring somebody else with you.
That's right. Okay, what else?
The acquisition of power, just using that scripture, like the Lord will, if you're walking in step with His call,
Yep.
like power will. His
I
power,
think
true
the answer to Pfeffer on that kind of thing is Dr. Costin, right? You think Dr. Costin was looking for, hey, one day I'm going to carve out a path to become a college president? No, he was just being a willing vessel where God would lead him, and right?
Yeah. I don't think he sees this as power either, he sees it more as a responsibility.
Yes, this is him holding that loosely, right? And being willing to be used where God is going to use him. Okay, what else?
I think Ella already spoke, but I just thought what she said was super cool. And I don't know if everyone heard it. She said the true power when she was talking about God. Like we're talking about power and seeking power. We should be seeking His power in our lives.
Absolutely.
So that when in that context, it doesn't have that same. I just thought that was cool the way she wrote it out.
Yeah, so maybe there's a good power and a not so good power, and Pepper's telling us about the not so good power, and it's just different, right? And you don't have to scratch out others' eyeballs and climb over them in order to get
that power,
right?
When I think about Jesus in the desert, like how the devil tempted him to use the power, like, you know, I think that's what the world does to us.
And then after the Satan left, the angels did come and take care of him after he had already denied himself.
And it is tempting. I mean, you'd be surprised how little power it takes to make people tyrants. I mean, it's really amazing to watch. I've seen, one of my older kids saying to younger kids like, well, but, when you get to my grade, how old are you? Okay. Okay, who else hasn't spoken?
I think, I don't know if someone said this earlier, but how we, in the last semester, we discussed power versus authority. And a lot of connotations, I always took it as power to be a negative thing.
Not necessarily.
Well, you all think you should use your authority over your
But
power.
authority leads to power, not the other way around.
Right.
If it's the other way around, you're a tyrant.
Yeah, so, I think this is just opening my mind to different ways of, I guess, obtaining and showcasing power.
Okay.
I think following up on that, one of the reflections that Amy had, because I had a complete opposite reaction to it, like where the phrase that he has, as long as you keep your boss or bosses happy, performance really does not matter to me. And I hate it when people do that. They don't perform well, but they're just telling you to boss. But when she looked at it the opposite way, where, well, not really opposite, but it is the same thing, where I have great relationships with my bosses, and I know I want to do the best I can in my performance, but if I make a mistake, it's not going to matter as much, because they have grace with me, but also see that I'm really trying hard with my performances as well.
Well, they build that trust.
That's that trust and relationship that we were just talking about, right? Okay.
I think the path to the power is naturally created when you do the right thing. You don't need to plan people to get power.
Okay, meritocracy. Go ahead.
One of the statements in there that we didn't talk about, but I thought was interesting, it says most people think they have 20 years of experience, where they usually have 1 year of experience repeated
20 times. Yeah. That's good stuff. Okay, who else has not gotten a chance to say anything? Did you? I don't recall you either.
Well, I guess my takeaway was power and influence. So it's a lot of it's down to perception. How are you going to utilize your power? Is it really good or evil? Are you going to serve others? So serve in leadership, circling it back. But there's a lot of it is applicable, like I think.
Yeah, that's
Like the whole first
that's the thing
introduction, I was like, yes,
that's
I love
really
this
hard
book, I
about
love
this.
that. And
A
then the
lot
rest
of
was
it-
like,
That's right, a
It's
lot
like
of it
I
is,
saw myself
yes,
in
you
it.
see this working,
So,
right?
Yeah.
But should you do it, and should you do it that way, and if
Correct.
so, for what reason?
And
that's where the rub is.
Yeah.
And that's why I chose the book. Right? Okay, yes?
I guess just to go back on what I was telling you about the whole, as long as you keep your boss happy, your performance doesn't matter. You know, I was telling you about that one person, and, you know, like you said, like, even though, because I remember back in 6 or 7, we always talked about, like, feedback is good. And when you said about, you know, yeah, but she, like, it's respect, you know, it's a respect thing. So I feel like not just us trusting our bosses, but the bosses, you know, trusting us. I feel like with that respect, you know, it'll be more easy for her to say, okay, her performance is good, and I can trust her. So, you know, if she trusts you, she's happy.
Yeah, if
So-
you have both of those things, you're solid.
Yeah, you know, so that's the
Right.
person.
Okay, TJ, did you want to add anything? 'Cause
I just like how, I've noticed how the competence piece that you spoke of, even with Chaplain Costin, knowing that he was once our chief of chaplains in the Air Force, and though he's a very learned man, accomplished man, you know, he's not the first to talk about that, and you know, it's really takes to the idea of character. It's probably the reason why many people in leadership tend to have that space of moral conflict where I will tell you, even right now, it's a very difficult task of trying to, everything that was in that book was exactly what I'm supposed to learn to do well in the Air Force, and many chaplains struggle with that idea. This is the plan of success versus
Yeah, because you have to
success
filter it
versus
scripturally.
power.
Yeah.
Right, but right. So when you speak on behalf of that, you need to be prepared.
Yeah.
For the backlash of, well, this is the real world. Well, I'm not this world. You know,
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
this
right.
world. So.
Well, welcome to class. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
We're done. I will see you not in 2 weeks, but in 4 weeks. All right? Bye-bye.